the slow breathing of Rome. In the earliest hour before sunrise, Rome does not yet feel like an empire. It feels like stone and air. A faint blue darkness rests over tiled rooftops, and the narrow streets lie in silence, as if they are holding their breath before the first movement of the day. The night has not fully departed. It lingers gently in the coolness that settles into the marble steps and along the edges of fountains. Somewhere, water continues to flow. It flows as it always has, steady, patient, untroubled by human ambition. The aqueducts, stretching across distant hills, have carried it faithfully through the night. The fountains murmur softly into basins carved generations ago. Their sound is neither loud nor quiet. It is constant. Inside a modest domus near the Subura district, a small oil lamp burns low. The flame trembles slightly as air moves through the open atrium. The household sleeps in separate chambers divided by thin walls and hanging curtains. Linen blankets rest lightly over still bodies. A faint scent of ash, olive oil, and warm stone lingers in the air. Then, slowly, someone wakes. Not abruptly, not with urgency, but gradually, as though rising from beneath calm water. Marcus, not a senator, not a soldier of fame, not a poet, simply a citizen among thousands, opens his eyes to darkness softened by blue dawn. He does not move at first. He listens. There is something deeply steady about the sound of early Rome. A cart wheel far in the distance. A sandal scraping stone. A cough echoing briefly, then fading. He turns slightly on his side, feeling the cool linen beneath his hand. The air of morning brushes lightly across his face. He breathes in, slow and deep, as though measuring the day before stepping into it. After some time, perhaps a minute, perhaps 5, he rises. His feet touch the stone floor. The cold travels gently upward through his body. He walks without speaking to the basin near the atrium and pours water from a clay jug over his hands. The water spills between his fingers and strikes the basin below with a quiet rhythm. There is no mirror. No glass reflecting back a face. Only water, skin, and the awareness of another day beginning. Outside, the sky lightens gradually, though the sun itself has not yet appeared. The eastern edge of the world begins to glow faintly gold. The rooftops shift from shadow into shape. A bakery down the street opens its shutters. Wood scrapes against wood. Inside, embers from the night are coaxed gently back into flame. Dough prepared in darkness now waits beneath linen cloths. The baker presses his hands into it, slowly, rhythmically, shaping loaves that will soon scent the entire street. The first true smell of the day is bread. It drifts outward through narrow passageways and settles into corners of the neighborhood. A woman passing by pauses, almost unconsciously, and inhales. Her basket rests against her hip. She adjusts her shawl and continues walking. Rome begins its quiet expansion into motion. Marcus steps into the street. The stones beneath his sandals are uneven, worn by countless feet. He knows each irregularity without looking down. A neighbor across the way nods once. No elaborate greeting is necessary. Presence is enough. As he walks toward the Forum, the city gradually assembles itself around him. A mule shifts in its harness, leather creaking softly. A vendor arranges figs in neat pyramids. A boy runs briefly, then slows when called back by his mother. Nothing is dramatic. Nothing demands attention. Yet everything exists fully. The Forum at this hour is wide and almost peaceful. Columns stand tall, pale in the new light. The open space feels larger before it fills. The marble beneath Marcus's feet still holds the coolness of night. He pauses for a moment, not from necessity, but from habit. He enjoys this hour. Before voices rise, before debates sharpen, before trade becomes negotiation. Soon, others arrive. A cloth merchant unfolds fabric with deliberate care, smoothing each crease with his palm. A bronze worker polishes small lamps until they catch the growing light. Two elderly men sit on a low stone bench and begin a conversation already started many years ago. The sun finally breaks above the horizon. Light spills into the forum slowly, touching the upper edges of buildings first, then sliding downward across stone steps and into shaded corners. The city warms by degrees. With warmth comes sound. More footsteps. More greetings. The layered murmur of daily exchange. But even at its busiest, the sound never becomes a roar. It becomes a texture, woven threads of human presence overlapping one another. Marcus makes his small transactions without haste. A measure of grain. A brief word with a tradesman. A quiet acknowledgement of a political notice posted along a wall. Nothing in his day will alter the fate of the empire. And that is precisely why it feels steady. Above them all, the sky remains wide and patient. Time passes not by ticking hands, but by the movement of light and shadow. By mid-morning, the air has grown warmer. Dust rises lightly beneath sandals and settles again almost immediately. Children pass through the edge of the forum carrying wax tablets, their styluses tapping gently against the wooden frames as they walk. One child looks upward at the tall columns and wonders, briefly, how something so large remains standing. He does not ask aloud. He simply continues walking. Rome, at this hour, breathes fully. Not fast, not slow, simply steady. And if one were to stand very still in the center of it all, eyes half closed, listening not to words but to rhythm, they might begin to feel something ancient and reassuring. A city not rushing forward, not fearing tomorrow, but repeating, gently, the patterns of countless yesterdays. The day has only begun. And there is still much light left to move across stone. As the morning stretches gently toward midday, the light over Rome grows whiter, fuller, and more direct. Shadows that once lay long across the streets now shorten, retreating quietly beneath columns and archways. The city does not rush into this brightness. It settles into it. Marcus remains in the forum a while longer, though his errands are nearly finished. He has always found something grounding in watching the rhythm of others. A woman weighing olives with careful precision. A man counting coins twice before placing them into a leather pouch. A young apprentice standing slightly behind his master, observing more than speaking. Above them, the sky is pale and wide. The marble steps leading up to the basilica begin to warm under the growing sun. If one were to press a palm against the stone now, it would feel neither cold nor hot, just gently alive with stored heat. A faint breeze passes through the open square, carrying with it small movements of dust and the soft scent of pressed grapes from somewhere beyond the immediate streets. There is no urgency in the air. Even conversation seems to lengthen. Words are spoken fully, without being clipped short. Gestures unfold slowly, hands moving through space with intention rather than haste. By late morning, Marcus begins the short walk toward the baths. The streets have grown brighter now. Laundry hangs from upper windows, drifting lazily in the warm air. A dog lies in a narrow strip of shade, eyes half closed, ears flicking occasionally at distant sounds. The public baths rise ahead, large, solid, patient structures of stone. Inside, the atmosphere shifts immediately. The air is heavier here, infused with warmth and moisture. Footsteps echo differently against tiled floors. Water laps gently in the pools, its surface rippling when someone descends slowly into it. Marcus moves first into the tepidarium. The warmth embraces him gradually. Not overwhelming, not sharp. just enough to soften muscle and quiet thought. He sits along a stone bench, allowing the heat to surround him. Around him, men speak in low tones. No one raises their voice. There is something about warm air that encourages stillness. A man nearby describes the condition of his vineyard in unhurried detail. Another responds with mild agreement. A third listens, nodding occasionally, eyes drifting toward the patterned ceiling above. Steam rises in thin veils. It blurs the edges of bodies and stone alike, making everything appear softer, less defined. Time seems suspended within this warmth. After some time, perhaps 15 minutes, perhaps longer, Marcus moves into the caldarium. The heat is deeper here. The air feels thick and close. He lowers himself slowly into the pool, the water folding around him in widening circles. The warmth seeps into his shoulders, down his arms, into the quiet spaces behind his thoughts. Breathing becomes slower, more deliberate. Water drips rhythmically from the edge of the basin into a channel below. Each drop lands with a gentle echo. No one speaks now. The silence is not empty. It is full. Eventually, he emerges and passes into the frigidarium. The cool water there is clear and still. When he steps in, the sensation is sharp for only a moment, then it settles into something refreshing and calm. The body adjusts. The skin tightens briefly, then relaxes again. This cycle of warm and cool, tension and release, is not dramatic. It is repetitive. Comfortingly so. When Marcus leaves the baths, the sun has reached its highest point. Midday. The light now falls directly from above, flattening shadows. The stones of the street glow almost pale white. Heat gathers between buildings and rests there, unmoving. Activity begins to soften. Shopkeepers draw partial coverings across their stalls. Not fully closed, but shaded. Conversations grow shorter. Even footsteps seem fewer. This is the hour of rest. Marcus returns home. Inside the domus, the atrium feels cooler than the street. The open roof allows a square of bright light to fall onto the shallow pool below. The water reflects patterns onto surrounding walls, small shifting shapes of brightness. His wife has arranged a simple meal. Bread, still slightly warm. A small dish of olives. Goat cheese. A handful of figs split open carefully. They do not speak much as they eat. There is no tension in the silence. Only familiarity. Outside, the city hum lowers. Some lie down briefly on woven couches. Others sit with backs against shaded walls. A child traces lines absent-mindedly in the dust with a stick. A cart driver removes his sandals and rests his feet against cool stone. Even the birds seem quieter now. Heat presses gently against rooftops. Time stretches. It does not feel empty, only wide. Marcus reclines for a short while after eating. He does not fully sleep. Instead, he hovers in that quiet space between waking and dreaming, where thoughts drift loosely and sounds blend together. From somewhere nearby comes the faint splash of water. A distant murmur of voices softened by thick air. A single hammer striking metal, slow, spaced, unhurried. Rome at midday feels suspended. Not asleep. Not awake. Simply resting. The empire, in all its scale and ambition, pauses for breath. And in that pause, there is something profoundly gentle. The sun will eventually begin its descent. The shadows will lengthen once more. But for now, the light holds steady above. And the stone beneath it absorbs warmth patiently. Midday does not end suddenly. It thins. The white intensity of the sun softens almost imperceptibly, and the stillness that rested over Rome begins to loosen its hold. Shadows which had withdrawn beneath walls and colonnades slowly stretch outward once more, tentative at first, then longer with each passing moment. Marcus rises from his brief rest. The air inside the domus feels cooler now, though the warmth still lingers faintly in the stone. Light falls at a different angle through the open atrium, no longer directly above, but slightly slanted, creating long, soft patterns across the floor. He steps back into the street. Afternoon in Rome carries a different sound than morning. It is not the beginning of motion, but the return of it. Shutters open again, though not fully. Merchants resume their places beside half-covered stalls. A fabric seller lifts a corner of linen to allow air to move through. Somewhere, a potter resumes the slow turning of his wheel, the clay rotating steadily beneath patient hands. The rhythm is calmer now. Morning held anticipation. And there is still much light left to move across stone. As the morning stretches gently toward midday, the light over Rome grows whiter, fuller, and more direct. Shadows that once lay long across the streets now shorten, retreating quietly beneath columns and archways. The city does not rush into this brightness. It settles into it. Marcus remains in the Forum a while longer, though his errands are nearly finished. He has always found something grounding in watching the rhythm of others. A woman weighing olives with careful precision. A man counting coins twice before placing them into a leather pouch. A young apprentice standing slightly behind his master, observing more than speaking. Above them, the sky is pale and wide. The marble steps leading up to the basilica begin to warm under the growing sun. If one were to press a palm against the stone now, it would feel neither cold nor hot, just gently alive with stored heat. A faint breeze passes through the open square, carrying with it small movements of dust and the soft scent of pressed grapes from somewhere beyond the immediate streets. There is no urgency in the air. Even conversation seems to lengthen. Words are spoken fully, without being clipped short. Gestures unfold slowly, hands moving through space with intention rather than haste. By late morning, Marcus begins the short walk toward the baths. The streets have grown brighter now. Laundry hangs from upper windows, drifting lazily in the warm air. A dog lies in a narrow strip of shade, eyes half closed, ears flicking occasionally at distant sounds. The public baths rise ahead, large, solid, patient structures of stone. Inside, the atmosphere shifts immediately. The air is heavier here, infused with warmth and moisture. Footsteps echo differently against tiled floors. Water laps gently in the pools, its surface rippling when someone descends slowly into it. Marcus moves first into the tepidarium. The warmth embraces him gradually. Not overwhelming, not sharp, just enough to soften muscle and quiet thought. He sits along a stone bench, allowing the heat to surround him. Around him, men speak in low tones. No one raises their voice. There is something about warm air that encourages stillness. A man nearby describes the condition of his vineyard in unhurried detail. Another responds with mild agreement. A third listens, nodding occasionally, eyes drifting toward the patterned ceiling above. Steam rises in thin veils. It blurs the edges of bodies and stone alike, making everything appear softer, less defined. Time seems suspended within this warmth. After some time, perhaps 15 minutes, perhaps longer, Marcus moves into the caldarium. The heat is deeper here. The air feels thick and close. He lowers himself slowly into the pool, the water folding around him in widening circles. The warmth seeps into his shoulders, down his arms, into the quiet spaces behind his thoughts. Breathing becomes slower, more deliberate. Water drips rhythmically from the edge of the basin into a channel below. Each drop lands with a gentle echo. No one speaks now. The silence is not empty. It is full. Eventually, he emerges and passes into the frigidarium. The cool water there is clear and still. When he steps in, the sensation is sharp for only a moment, then it settles into something refreshing and calm. The body adjusts. The skin tightens briefly, then relaxes again. This cycle of warm and cool, tension and release, is not dramatic. It is repetitive. Comfortingly so. When Marcus leaves the baths, the sun has reached its highest point. Midday. The light now falls directly from above, flattening shadows. The stones of the street glow almost pale white. Heat gathers between buildings and rests there, unmoving. Activity begins to soften. Shopkeepers draw partial coverings across their stalls. Not fully closed, but shaded. Conversations grow shorter. Even footsteps seem fewer. This is the hour of rest. Marcus returns home. Inside the domus, the atrium feels cooler than the street. The open roof allows a square of bright light to fall onto the shallow pool below. The water reflects patterns onto surrounding walls, small shifting shapes of brightness. His wife has arranged a simple meal. Bread, still slightly warm. A small dish of olives. Goat cheese. A handful of figs split open carefully. They do not speak much as they eat. There is no tension in the silence. Only familiarity. Outside, the city hum lowers. Some lie down briefly on woven couches. Others sit with backs against shaded walls. A child traces lines absent-mindedly in the dust with a stick. A cart driver removes his sandals and rests his feet against cool stone. Even the birds seem quieter now. Heat presses gently against rooftops. Time stretches. It does not feel empty, only wide. Marcus reclines for a short while after eating. He does not fully sleep. Instead, he hovers in that quiet space between waking and dreaming, where thoughts drift loosely and sounds blend together. From somewhere nearby comes the faint splash of water. A distant murmur of voices softened by thick air. A single hammer striking metal, slow, spaced, unhurried. Rome at midday feels suspended. Not asleep. Not awake. Simply resting. The empire, in all its scale and ambition, pauses for breath. And in that pause, there is something profoundly gentle. The sun will eventually begin its descent. The shadows will lengthen once more. But for now, the light holds steady above. And the stone beneath it absorbs warmth patiently. Midday does not end suddenly. It thins. The white intensity of the sun softens almost imperceptibly, and the stillness that rested over Rome begins to loosen its hold. Shadows which had withdrawn beneath walls and colonnades slowly stretch outward once more, tentative at first, then longer with each passing moment. Marcus rises from his brief rest. The air inside the domus feels cooler now, though the warmth still lingers faintly in the stone. Light falls at a different angle through the open atrium, no longer directly above, but slightly slanted, creating long, soft patterns across the floor. He steps back into the street. Afternoon in Rome carries a different sound than morning. It is not the beginning of motion, but the return of it. Shutters open again, though not fully. Merchants resume their places beside half-covered stalls. A fabric seller lifts a corner of linen to allow air to move through. Somewhere, a potter resumes the slow turning of his wheel, the clay rotating steadily beneath patient hands. The rhythm is calmer now. Morning held anticipation. The first star appears, faint at first, barely visible. Then another, slightly brighter. Soon, small points of light scatter across the darkness, steady and quiet. Without artificial glare, the night sky feels wide. Expansive. It stretches beyond the rooftops and columns, beyond the hills and the sea, into distances too large to fully imagine. The empire below feels small beneath it. Marcus steps briefly outside. The air is cooler now, carrying a softness that rests against the skin. The scent of extinguished fires drifts lightly through the street. Somewhere nearby, someone pours water into a basin. The sound is clear and distinct in the quiet. He pauses beneath the open sky. The stones beneath his sandals no longer hold the day's heat. They feel neutral now, balanced. A guard passes at the end of the street, walking with measured steps. His presence is steady rather than watchful. His sandals strike the ground in even rhythm, not hurried, not heavy. The city at night is not asleep all at once. It dims gradually. Inside homes, lamps are lowered. Some are extinguished entirely. Others remain lit faintly, their flames small and contained. Through narrow openings in shutters, thin lines of warm light spill briefly into the street before vanishing as doors close. Marcus returns inside. The atrium has grown darker. The single lamp casts a circle of gentle illumination. Beyond that circle, the corners of the room dissolve into shadow. He sits once more beside the shallow pool beneath the open roof. Above him, the stars are clearer now. The water reflects them faintly, trembling with the slightest movement of air. Each reflection stretches and bends before settling again. It is impossible to tell, for a moment, where sky ends and water begins. His breathing slows. The house grows quieter. A child shifts in another room, then settles again. Linen rustles softly. The faint crackle of the small fire reduces to a glow. The sounds of Rome at night are fewer, but more distinct. A single pair of footsteps somewhere far away. The brief bark of a dog. Wind moving gently through a narrow alley. Time feels different now. Less measured. Less structured. The responsibilities of the day have dissolved. Tomorrow has not yet arrived. There is only this suspended moment between what has passed and what will come. Marcus rises and extinguishes the lamp. The flame shrinks inward, flickers once, and disappears, leaving behind a thin thread of smoke that curls upward and vanishes into darkness. The room is now lit only by starlight. Gradually, even that fades as his eyes close. Outside, Rome remains. Breathing softly, columns standing, streets resting, water flowing endlessly through unseen channels. The empire does not sleep entirely, but it dreams. And within its stone walls, beneath its open sky, thousands of lives settle gently into night. Night in Rome does not fall like a curtain. It settles like dust, softly, layer upon layer, until even the outlines of buildings grow gentle and indistinct beneath the sky. Most lamps have now been extinguished. Only a few remain, small amber points glowing faintly behind shutters or along distant porticos. The streets are largely empty. The stone pathways, worn smooth by countless footsteps, now rest undisturbed. The air has cooled completely. It moves slowly through narrow alleys, brushing against walls that have released the warmth of the day. Fabric left hanging outdoors shifts almost imperceptibly. Wooden signs creak once, then return to stillness. Inside the domus, Marcus lies awake for a brief while longer. Not restless, not troubled, simply aware. The sounds of the city at this hour are spaced widely apart. Each one arrives alone, then dissolves into silence before the next appears. Somewhere far away, a gate closes with a muted thud. A guard's sandal strikes stone in steady rhythm, measured steps that repeat and repeat, fading as he turns a distant corner. Water continues to flow through fountains and hidden channels. It has not paused since morning, nor will it pause before dawn. Its quiet persistence feels almost eternal. Marcus shifts slightly beneath his linen covering. The fabric is cool against his skin. He breathes in deeply, then slowly exhales. The scent of stone and faint ash lingers in the darkness. Beyond the open roof of the atrium, the sky is vast. Stars burn with steady light, undisturbed by smoke or glare. The Milky Way stretches faintly across the heavens, a pale river mirroring the Tiber below. If one were to stand in the center of the forum now and look upward, the columns would frame the sky like silent witnesses to something far older than empire. The city seems smaller at night. Its ambitions quieter. Its boundaries softened. In the Subura district, A mother rises briefly to adjust a blanket over her sleeping child. Her movements are slow, careful not to disturb the air too much. She listens for a moment, hearing only steady breathing, and lies back down. In another quarter, a baker who rose before dawn now sleeps heavily, his hands resting still for the first time in many hours. On the Palatine Hill, in grander homes, silk curtains hang motionless. Servants sleep in small adjoining chambers. Even within wealth, night levels all differences. In darkness, every roof shelters the same fragile stillness. A cat moves silently along a wall. Its paws make no sound against stone. It pauses, listening, eyes reflecting faint starlight. Then it disappears into shadow as though it had never been there. Time stretches thin in these hours. There are no bells marking passage. No marketplace exchanges measuring the day. Only the slow turning of the earth beneath the stars. Marcus's breathing deepens. The last fragments of thought dissolve. He drifts not into dreams of grandeur or conquest, but into something simpler, the memory of warm stone beneath his hand at the fountain, the scent of bread at dawn, the shifting reflections in the atrium pool. Night folds around him completely. Rome continues its quiet vigil. A ship moves slowly along the Tiber, guided by a lantern hung at its bow. The flame sways gently with the motion of water, casting trembling light across the surface. The oars dip in steady intervals, not hurried, not forceful, just enough to carry the vessel forward through darkness. Far beyond the city walls, fields rest beneath open sky. Crops bend slightly in the cool breeze. Oxen lie upon the earth, their massive forms calm and unmoving. The empire spans continents. Yet in this hour, it feels suspended in silence. Eventually, though no one sees the exact moment, the eastern horizon begins to lighten. Not bright. Not even visible at first. Just a subtle thinning of darkness. The stars near that edge begin to fade. The air shifts ever so slightly. Night has not ended, but it has begun to loosen. Rome, still wrapped in shadow, prepares quietly for another breath of dawn. Sun Bolum Olin Part 6 Yerusalem. There is a moment before dawn when Rome feels suspended between worlds. The night has not fully withdrawn, yet morning has already begun its quiet approach. The sky in the east shifts from deep indigo to a softer shade, not yet blue, not yet gold, but something in between, like breath against cool glass. The stars nearest the horizon fade first. They do not vanish abruptly. They dim gently, surrendering their light without resistance. Higher above, a few still remain, steady and patient, as though reluctant to leave. The air is colder now than it was at midnight. It carries a delicate clarity, clean and weightless. Sounds travel farther in this hour. A single footstep echoes more distinctly. The distant movement of water seems sharper, more defined. Within the domus, Marcus stirs. Not because of noise. Not because of duty. But because the body, accustomed to the rhythm of light, senses the change before the mind does. He inhales slowly. The air feels different. He opens his eyes to darkness that is no longer complete. The open atrium above reveals a sky that is gradually softening. The outlines of walls begin to reappear. The shallow pool reflects a faint gray shimmer where starlight once trembled. For a few quiet moments, he remains still. This hour belongs to no one. The merchants have not yet opened their stalls. The forum stands empty. Even the guards walk more slowly, their watch nearly complete. Outside, somewhere beyond the narrow street, a rooster calls once. The sound is clear, solitary. Then silence returns. Marcus rises carefully, his movements slow, almost reverent toward the stillness. His feet touch stone that has cooled fully through the night. He walks to the basin and pours water over his hands, just as he did the day before. The water feels colder now, more alive. It wakes the senses without startling them. Beyond the doorway, the sky grows lighter by degrees. The rooftops shift from shadow into shape. The highest edges of temples and columns begin to separate from the darkness behind them. Rome does not awaken with a roar. It awakens with layers. A baker relights embers that have slept beneath ash. A woman opens a shutter halfway, letting in the first thin line of dawn. A cart driver adjusts harness straps in near silence. The first scent of bread will soon return. The first voices will rise. But not yet. This is the quiet hinge between yesterday and today. Marcus steps outside. The street is nearly empty, washed in a pale silver glow. The stone beneath his sandals feels cool and steady. He pauses, just for a moment, looking toward the east where the light gathers strength. The sun has not yet appeared, but its promise fills the horizon. The city seems younger in this light. Less worn. As though the passing of time has been briefly erased. He begins walking toward the Forum once more. Each step echoes softly. Ahead, the wide open space waits, just as it did yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. The columns stand unchanged. The fountains continue their endless flow. The empire will move again. Trade will resume. Voices will layer upon voices. Children will hurry with tablets tucked beneath their arms. Shadows will lengthen and shrink and lengthen again. But for this brief moment, before the sun breaks fully above the hills, Rome simply breathes. Steady, unhurried, eternal in its repetition. The first edge of sunlight appears. It touches the highest stone. And the day begins again. The sun has risen fully now. Its light spreads evenly across the city, illuminating rooftops, columns, and narrow streets in a soft, unwavering glow. The early chill has withdrawn, leaving behind air that feels neutral and calm. Marcus walks again toward the Forum. There is comfort in repetition. The same stones beneath his sandals. The same turn at the corner where a fig tree leans slightly over a wall. The same fountain where water spills without interruption. Yet nothing is ever entirely identical. A different vendor stands in a familiar place. A cart pauses where yesterday it rolled through. A new crack has appeared in the edge of a clay jar set beside a doorway. The city renews itself in small ways. As Marcus moves through the street, the sound of sandals against stone becomes a quiet rhythm, a steady brushing, a soft tapping. When several people walk together, the sounds overlap gently, creating a layered cadence that fills the space between buildings. It is not loud, but it is constant. A woman passes carrying folded linen over her arms. The fabric catches the sunlight and glows pale against the darker walls. She walks with careful balance, her steps measured to keep the folds even. Nearby, a young apprentice practices tying a knot around a bundle of reeds. His fingers move slowly, uncertain at first, then more confidently. His master watches without speaking. The Forum opens before Marcus once more. Today it feels slightly busier than yesterday, though perhaps that is only perception. A grain shipment has arrived earlier than expected. Several men stand around discussing its weight and quality. Their voices remain calm, but their gestures are a little more animated. Still, nothing disturbs the underlying steadiness of the day. Marcus pauses beside a column and looks upward. The stone is worn smooth in places where countless hands have rested over decades. He places his own hand there briefly, feeling the warmth that has begun to gather as the sun climbs higher. The marble does not resist. It holds the warmth gently. Across the square, two boys sit cross-legged near the steps of a temple, tracing letters into wax tablets. Their teacher stands nearby, arms folded loosely, occasionally correcting a stroke with a quiet word. A pigeon descends suddenly, wings fluttering for a brief second before settling. It pecks at something unseen between the stones, then lifts its head, watching the world with still patience. The morning advances. A light wind passes through the open space of the forum, stirring dust just enough to catch sunlight. The particles drift, suspended briefly, before settling once more. Marcus purchases a small measure of dried figs. The vendor counts them slowly into a shallow bowl. 1, 2, 3. No one rushes the counting. Coins exchange hands with a soft metallic sound, muted by the warmth of skin. Further along, a man repairs a sandal strap with careful precision. He threads leather through a small opening, pulls it taut, and ties it with deliberate firmness. The owner of the sandal stands balanced on one foot, leaning slightly against a wall, patient and silent. Time continues to move not in leaps, but in small, consistent steps. By mid-morning, the sun has strengthened again. The edges of buildings cast shorter shadows. The stone begins to radiate faint heat upward. Conversations thin slightly as people seek small patches of shade beneath porticos and awnings. Marcus walks toward a quieter section of the square, where a public notice has been affixed to a wall. He reads it slowly, not because it is difficult, but because reading itself feels unhurried. The letters carved into would announce minor civic matters, maintenance of a road beyond the city gates, a reminder of upcoming tax collection. Practical details. Necessary, but not urgent. He steps back. Around him, life continues at its steady pace. The rhythm of sandals. The murmur of trade. The distant splash of water. If one were to close their eyes in this moment, the city would not disappear. It would remain present through sound alone, a living texture of quiet human movement. Above, the sky remains wide and pale. The empire stretches beyond sight. Yet here, in this square of worn stone and patient columns, existence feels simple, grounded, measured by light and breath. Marcus turns toward home once more, knowing that the day will unfold in familiar patterns: warmth, rest, shadow, evening, night. And tomorrow, it will begin again. Not dramatically, not differently, but steadily. Always steadily. The morning matures without announcement. The sun has now climbed high enough to erase the coolness from shaded corners. Light settles evenly along rooftops and across the wide stones of the forum. The brightness is not harsh, but complete, filling every visible surface with calm clarity. Marcus does not hurry home. Instead, he turns into a narrower street where craftsmen work in patient rhythm. Here, the sounds are softer, more focused. A hammer touches bronze in slow intervals, not striking forcefully, but tapping with measured precision. Each contact produces a small metallic tone that lingers briefly in the air before dissolving. Nearby, a weaver sits beside an open doorway. Threads stretch across a wooden frame, pulled taut and orderly. Her fingers move back and forth in steady motion, guiding colored strands through the warp. The pattern grows almost imperceptibly, one thin line at a time. Nothing dramatic occurs. Only the accumulation of small movements. Marcus pauses near a carpenter shaping a simple wooden stool. The scent of fresh cut wood drifts outward into the street. Fine shavings fall to the ground like curled ribbons. The carpenter smooths the surface slowly, running his palm across the grain to feel for irregularities. He does not measure with tools. He measures with touch. Further along, a potter turns his wheel. The clay rotates in calm circles beneath his hands. His thumbs press gently inward, shaping a vessel that rises from nothing into form. The wheel spins steadily, neither fast nor slow, but at a pace that matches his breathing. The vessel widens slightly, then narrows, then settles into its final shape. Marcus watches for a moment, then continues walking. There is something reassuring about the repetition of labor, the way skill becomes rhythm, and rhythm becomes quiet certainty. As the sun strengthens toward midday, the air thickens again. Shadows shrink. The street grows quieter. Craftsmen begin to slow their movements, not from exhaustion, but from instinct. The body understands heat better than the mind does. Marcus returns home once more. Inside, the atrium pool reflects a square of bright sky above. The water surface is still, undisturbed except for the faint ripple caused by a drifting leaf. He sits briefly along the stone edge. The warmth of the day presses gently around him. A faint breeze enters through the open roof, carrying distant sounds, a cartwheel turning, a child calling out, the muted rhythm of a hammer far away. Midday approaches again, and with it, the gradual softening of movement. In a nearby house, someone pours wine into a shallow cup. The liquid flows slowly, catching light before settling. In another street, shutters close halfway, allowing narrow beams of brightness to fall across interior walls. Even the pigeons retreat to higher ledges, their wings folding into stillness. Marcus reclines once more. Not deeply asleep. Not fully awake. The hours around midday do not demand alertness. They invite quiet suspension. Outside, Rome breathes more slowly. The empire rests within its own boundaries of stone and habit. Heat gathers along rooftops and then lingers. Time stretches thin again. No bells mark this hour. No signal divides one moment from the next. Only the slow movement of light across walls, across floors, across skin. Marcus closes his eyes briefly. The sounds blur gently into one another. Water flowing. Fabric shifting. A distant footstep. The day has not changed. Yet it feels different in its subtle details. A slightly warmer breeze, a slightly longer shadow, a slightly quieter street. Repetition does not erase life. It deepens it. And so Rome continues, layer by layer, breath by breath, beneath the steady sun. The afternoon light had begun its slow transformation, turning from bright gold into a softer, heavier glow that rested gently upon the rooftops of Rome. The sharp sounds of commerce that once rang confidently through the streets were now muted, dulled by warmth and repetition, as though even noise itself had grown tired. Inside the domus, the air felt thicker, slower. Livia sat near the atrium fountain once more, though now the water's gentle trickle seemed louder in the quiet. A small breeze entered through the compluvium, just strong enough to stir the surface of the basin and send faint ripples across the reflection of the sky above. She threaded wool carefully between her fingers. Each motion followed the last without urgency. The rhythm of weaving, loop, pull, adjust, required no conscious thought. It allowed the mind to drift freely, as the hands continued their quiet labor. In the kitchen area toward the rear of the house, a slave stirred lentils in a clay pot. The scent of simmering herbs, thyme, bay, and a trace of garlic, rose slowly into the air. The smell was neither strong nor sharp. It was steady, familiar. From beyond the walls, the city exhaled. A cartwheel rolled lazily over uneven stone. Somewhere distant, a vendor called out the last of his produce, though without the earlier insistence. A child laughed, then fell silent. Sandaled footsteps passed and faded. In the peristyle garden, shadows lengthened across the mosaic floor, stretching like dark fingers toward the columns. The marble, warm all day under the sun, now began to cool, surrendering its stored heat gradually into the air. Marcus returned from the baths not long after. His hair was still damp, darker than before, and his skin carried the faint scent of oil. The bath had softened him. The tension in his shoulders had eased. His movements were slower, more measured, as though the heated rooms and the cool plunge had washed away not only sweat but also the sharper edges of thought. He paused briefly beside Livia. "Has the day quieted?" he asked softly. "It has," she replied, without lifting her eyes from her work. He did not press further. Instead, he walked into the garden and lowered himself onto a stone bench beneath the shade of a fig tree. The leaves rustled faintly above him, and a single fig, heavy and ripe, dropped softly into the grass. He closed his eyes. Not to sleep. Not yet. but simply to rest within the silence that had begun to wrap itself gently around the household. The dog shifted near the doorway, exhaling through its nose in contentment. The fountain continued its patient trickle. The lentils simmered. Time moved forward, but so slowly now that it almost felt suspended. Above the city, the sun descended toward the western hills. Its light turned amber, and Rome, so powerful in the full brightness of day, softened into something almost fragile. The light no longer stood high above the city. It leaned. Across the tiled roofs of Rome, shadows stretched in long deliberate lines, filling the narrow streets with a cooler tone that softened their harsh edges. The air shifted almost imperceptibly, carrying with it the faint promise of evening. Inside the domus, preparations began, not hurried, not urgent, but inevitable. In the kitchen, the lentils had thickened into a smooth, gentle stew. A slave crushed garlic and herbs in a stone mortar, the rhythmic grinding slow and patient. Olive oil shimmered faintly in a shallow dish. Fresh bread, purchased earlier in the day, rested beneath a linen cloth, still faintly warm. The sounds were subdued, clay touching clay, a wooden spoon scraping lightly against the inside of a pot, quiet footsteps over mosaic floors. Livia set aside her weaving. She rose with measured grace and walked through the peristyle garden. The small fountain reflected the sky, now pale gold and lavender at its edges. She paused briefly to touch a leaf of rosemary growing along the wall, releasing its scent into the air. Marcus remained seated beneath the fig tree. He did not sleep. Instead, he watched the slow transformation of light across the columns. The white marble shifted from bright to honeyed, then to a tone almost like old parchment. The edges blurred slightly as the sun lowered. Beyond the walls, Rome murmured. The forum no longer rang with debate. The market stalls had mostly emptied. A final negotiation took place somewhere in the distance, voices low, controlled. A metal gate closed with a dull echo. From farther away, one could faintly hear the sound of sandals against stone, returning home. The city that had expanded outward all day now gently folded inward. Within the house, oil lamps were prepared. One by one, small clay lamps were filled. Wicks were trimmed. Not yet lit, only made ready. The scent of oil lingered softly in the air. The temperature dropped slightly. Marcus finally rose from the bench. He walked slowly along the colonnade, running his fingers lightly across the cool stone as he passed. He paused near the doorway of the triclinium, the dining room, where cushions had been arranged with care. The evening meal would not be extravagant. Bread, lentils, olives, perhaps a small portion of cheese. Enough to satisfy, not to overwhelm. There was comfort in simplicity. In the sky above, birds crossed in dark silhouettes, returning to hidden nests beneath tiled roofs and in the crevices of old stone. The day had begun to release its hold. The great city of Rome, powerful, crowded, loud, now breathed more slowly, as though even an empire required rest. Inside the domus, the first lamp was lit. Its flame trembled gently before settling into a steady glow. The light was soft, golden, calm, and the evening, unhurried and patient, began to unfold. The first lamp did not brighten the room all at once. It pushed back the darkness slowly, gently, as though asking permission. Shadows gathered in the corners of the triclinium, while the center of the room glowed in warm gold. The flame bent slightly when a faint breeze slipped through the courtyard, then steadied itself again. Livia adjusted one of the cushions. The fabric, dyed a soft terracotta, caught the lamplight and deepened in tone. She moved with quiet familiarity, knowing the rhythm of this hour without needing to think about it. Evening was not an event. It was a return. From the kitchen came the final sounds of preparation. A wooden ladle placed down, a clay lid set carefully over a pot. The scent of lentils, garlic, and olive oil lingered in the air, heavier now, richer. Marcus entered the room without speaking. He washed his hands in a small basin near the entrance. The water reflected the lamplight in small trembling patterns, like liquid bronze. He dried his hands on a linen cloth and took his place on the reclining couch. Outside, Rome dimmed. The last light left the rooftops. The narrow streets grew quiet except for the occasional passing cart, its wheels rolling more slowly now. Somewhere in the distance, a door closed. Somewhere else, laughter rose briefly, then faded. The city was not silent. It simply softened. Livia lit the second lamp. This one stood closer to the doorway, casting long vertical shadows across the columns of the peristyle. The fountain in the courtyard now reflected only flame and fragments of night sky. They began their meal without ceremony. Bread was broken by hand. Lentils were spooned into small bowls. Olives were passed quietly between them. The meal was warm, steady, uncomplicated. There was comfort in repetition. Marcus spoke briefly, a simple observation about the forum, about a man arguing too loudly over grain prices. Livia listened. She replied with a small nod and a faint smile. Their words were few. They did not need many. Above the house, the sky deepened into indigo. The first stars appeared, faint at first, then clearer as darkness settled fully over the city. A coolness drifted into the courtyard. The marble floors held the day's warmth a little longer, but slowly even they began to release it. The air grew still. The fountain's trickle became more noticeable in the quiet. After the meal, the bowls were cleared. The lamps continued to burn steadily, their flames smaller now but unwavering. Marcus returned to the bench beneath the fig tree. Livia sat beside him. They did not speak. The night wrapped around the domus like a soft cloak. Beyond its walls, Rome rested in layers, some homes still awake, others already surrendered to sleep. A distant dog barked once. Then nothing. The empire, vast and powerful, had folded itself into darkness. And within this small house, beneath the quiet Roman sky, two lives settled into the gentle stillness of night. The night did not arrive all at once. It settled gradually, like fine dust upon stone. The lamps inside the domus burned lower now. Their flames had grown smaller, steadier, no longer reaching upward with energy but resting close to their wicks. The air carried the faint scent of warm oil and extinguished heat from the kitchen hearth. Marcus remained seated beneath the fig tree. The leaves above him moved only slightly. Somewhere beyond the walls, a soft current of air traveled through the narrow Roman streets, slipping between buildings, cooling the stone that had absorbed the sun all day. Livia rose first. She walked quietly across the courtyard, her sandals barely making a sound against the mosaic floor. At the small fountain, she dipped her fingers into the water. It was cooler now. The surface reflected a narrow slice of sky where stars had multiplied without announcement. Overhead, the constellations spread clearly. Far from the city center, where fewer torches burned through the night, the sky appeared deeper, more complete. Rome, powerful and restless by day, seemed small beneath it. A final lamp was extinguished. The room did not fall into darkness abruptly. Instead, shadow expanded gently, filling the spaces where light had been. The outlines of columns softened. The doorway became a darker shape within dark. Marcus stood. He paused for a moment in the courtyard, looking upward, not searching for anything in particular, only observing. The night required no interpretation. Beyond the domus, the city had quieted almost entirely. The forum lay empty beneath the moonlight. Market stalls stood covered and still. The broad stones of the streets, worn smooth by countless footsteps, now held only the faint echo of memory. Somewhere far off, a watchman's staff struck stone once, a slow, deliberate sound marking the passing hour. Then silence returned. Inside, the household prepared for rest. Livia arranged the sleeping space with the same calm precision she had shown throughout the day. Linen was smoothed. A folded garment placed aside. Nothing hurried. Nothing neglected. Marcus lay down. The weight of the day, its conversations, its heat, its movement, dissolved not through effort, but through stillness. The body simply recognized that it was time. From outside, the faint trickle of the fountain continued. A constant, gentle rhythm. Breath slowed. The marble, now fully cooled, held the night air like a quiet reservoir. The fig leaves above whispered once more, then grew still. Rome slept. Not entirely. Somewhere, someone remained awake. But largely, deeply, sufficiently. And within the modest walls of the domus, beneath a sky older than the empire itself, two figures rested in the soft, undemanding quiet of night. The world did not end. It simply paused. There is a moment in every night when even silence grows deeper. It is the hour before dawn. The lamps have long since gone dark. The embers in the kitchen hearth have cooled to a faint, powdery gray. The courtyard fountain continues its steady trickle, but softer now, as though careful not to disturb the stillness. Marcus sleeps. His breathing is slow and even, rising and falling beneath a simple linen covering. The day has released him completely. No debates, no figures, no voices remain. Only rest. Livia shifts slightly in her sleep. Not awake. Not dreaming in any restless way. Just the natural turning of a body finding comfort. The room is cool. The stone walls hold the last of the night air. Outside the domus, Rome is quieter than at any other time. The streets are empty. The forum lies beneath a pale wash of moonlight, its columns casting long silver shadows across the worn stone. Market stalls stand untouched. Even the stray dogs have found corners to curl into. High above, the stars remain clear. But along the farthest edge of the horizon, something begins, so faint it is almost imagined. A thinning of darkness. Not light yet. Just less night. The watchman passes once more. His sandals brush the stone softly. The end of his staff taps against the ground, slower now, measured. His shift nearly complete. In the courtyard, a faint breeze moves through the fig tree. One leaf detaches. It falls without sound, settling on the mosaic floor near the fountain. The sky shifts again. The deepest indigo softens toward blue. The stars nearest the horizon begin to fade first, retreating without drama. The air changes, barely, but enough that the skin can sense it. A bird stirs. Not a full song. Just a small test of voice from somewhere on a rooftop. Then quiet again. Marcus turns slightly. Not awake yet, but closer. Livia's breathing adjusts. The body recognizes what the mind does not. The night is ending. Beyond the walls, Rome prepares to inhale. The ovens in distant bakeries will soon be lit. Water will be drawn from wells. Sandals will meet stone once more. The city will expand outward again, unfolding into sound and motion. But not yet. For one last suspended moment, everything rests in perfect balance, between darkness and light, between silence and speech, between stillness and movement. The first true line of dawn appears. Soft, pale, almost colorless. And the new day waits quietly at the edge of the world. Dawn does not rush. It arrives like a careful hand lifting a veil. The pale line on the horizon widens. Blue softens into silver. The outlines of rooftops sharpen one by one, emerging from shadow without sound. The stars withdraw completely now, leaving the sky open and clear. In the courtyard, the fig tree becomes visible again, first as a shape, then as leaves, then as texture. The small fallen leaf rests near the fountain, unmoved. Marcus opens his eyes. Not abruptly. Not with surprise. He simply returns. For a moment he does not move. He watches the faint light gathering along the upper edge of the wall. The world feels suspended, as if the city has not yet decided to awaken. Livia wakes shortly after. She inhales slowly, sensing the change in air. Morning has its own texture. Cooler, thinner, expectant. She rises quietly, careful not to disturb the calm that still lingers in the room. The first true sound of the day comes from beyond the domus walls. A distant wooden door opens. Then, another. A cartwheel rolls briefly over stone before stopping. Somewhere, water is poured from a clay jug into a basin. The sounds are soft, spaced apart, respectful of the hour. In a bakery not far from the forum, embers are stirred back to life. Flames catch beneath stacked wood. The scent of baking bread will soon drift through the narrow streets. Marcus steps into the courtyard. The sky above is now pale gold near the horizon, fading upward into gentle blue. No heat yet, only promise. He washes his face in the fountain basin. The water is cold enough to fully wake the senses. Droplets fall back into the pool, creating small expanding circles that disturb the reflection of morning light. Livia moves toward the kitchen space. She arranges simple morning bread on a clay plate. Figs, a small portion of cheese. Nothing elaborate. The first meal of the day is quiet nourishment, not ceremony. Beyond the walls, Rome stretches. Shutters open. Footsteps multiply. Voices begin, low at first, then gradually weaving together. A greeting. A negotiation beginning anew. A child's brief laughter. The rhythm builds gently, layer upon layer. The city inhales. Sunlight reaches the highest columns of the distant temples. It slides down marble surfaces, warming them slowly. The forum will soon fill. The market will unfold its fabrics and grains. Messengers will cross streets with measured urgency. But here, in this small courtyard, morning still moves calmly. Marcus breaks a piece of bread. Steam rises faintly in the cool air. Livia sits beside him. The day has begun, not with noise, not with demand, but with light. And Rome, ancient and patient, opens itself once more to motion. The courtyard was fully awake now. Sunlight filtered through the fig leaves, scattering shifting patterns across the mosaic floor. The fountain reflected a pale blue sky, undisturbed except for its gentle ripple. Everything moved as expected, until it didn't. At first, it was only a difference in rhythm. Beyond the walls of the domus, footsteps passed more quickly than usual. Not running, but urgent. Voices overlapped, not in argument, but in shared attention. A murmur spreading outward like a stone dropped into water. Marcus paused with the bread still in his hand. He listened. This was not the ordinary hum of market bargaining. It was focused, directional, moving toward the forum. Livia noticed too. She set her plate aside and stood slowly, stepping closer to the entrance corridor that led toward the street. The air itself felt charged, not dangerous, but altered. A boy's voice carried clearly from outside. "He has returned." Another voice answered. "From the north." Earlier than expected. Marcus rose. He did not rush. But something in his posture changed, a quiet alertness. "Returned." The word lingered. A commander? A magistrate? News from the frontier? Rome often received men back from distant provinces, from Gaul, from Hispania, from lands beyond the Alps. Sometimes they returned with triumph. Sometimes with silence. The footsteps outside thickened. More sandals striking stone in steady rhythm. A cart passed quickly, wheels clattering harder than necessary. The city's calm unfolding had shifted into gathering. Marcus stepped toward the doorway. He did not yet step into the street. Instead, he stood just inside the threshold, observing the movement beyond. Sunlight struck the far end of the road, illuminating dust rising gently from the growing crowd. Something was happening. Not chaos, not celebration, but expectation. Behind him, the courtyard remained still. The fountain flowed as always. The fig tree moved only slightly in the morning air. Inside the house, time felt steady. Outside, it had begun to accelerate. And Rome, vast and patient, had turned its attention toward something approaching from the north. The name reached the street before the man did. Caesar. It was not shouted. It moved from mouth to mouth, controlled, deliberate, almost cautious. Marcus heard it clearly now. Julius Caesar had returned to Rome. Not in triumphal procession. Not yet. No musicians, no laurel crowns, no formal declaration. But he had entered the city earlier than expected, coming from the northern territories. The murmur outside shifted again, less uncertain now, more defined. Some voices carried admiration. Others carried something quieter. Calculation. Marcus stepped just beyond the threshold of the domus. The morning light had grown brighter, catching in the rising dust stirred by gathering citizens. Shopkeepers stood half inside their doorways, pretending to arrange goods while clearly watching the street. A group of older men walked toward the forum more quickly than their age usually allowed. Livia remained just inside. She did not step into the street. Instead, she observed from the shadowed corridor, where cool air still lingered. Her expression did not change, but her attention sharpened. Rome had seen powerful men return before. Victories could bring stability, or imbalance. Further down the road, movement became visible. Not a parade, but an organized escort. Soldiers walked in controlled formation, their armor catching the morning sun in brief flashes of reflected light. Not many. Enough. No cheering crowds yet. Just watching. Caesar himself was not easily visible at first. Only the slow forward motion of the group suggested his presence within it. The city did not erupt. It leaned inward. Marcus felt something he could not immediately name. Not fear. Not excitement. A tightening. He had heard rumors for months. Whispers in the forum about loyalty, about the Senate's unease, about the weight of one man's influence growing too large for the old structures of the Republic. But rumors were distant things. This was not distant. This was Rome. This was morning light on stone, and a single figure moving steadily toward the heart of power. The fountain continued to flow behind him. The fig leaves stirred once. Above the rooftops, the sun climbed higher, indifferent to politics, indifferent to men. But in the streets below, something subtle had shifted. The ordinary day would continue. Bread would be sold. Deals would be made. Children would run through narrow alleys. Yet beneath it all, like a quiet current beneath calm water, the presence of Julius Caesar altered the weight of the air. Rome had awakened. But it was no longer an ordinary morning. Marcus did not move closer. Others stepped into the street, drawn forward by curiosity, by loyalty, by ambition. But he remained where sunlight met shadow, neither fully inside nor fully among the crowd. The name lingered in his mind. Julius Caesar. He had spoken it before in the forum. Casually, analytically, as one speaks of a distant force, like the weather over the sea. But distance had vanished. Now the name had weight. Marcus watched the soldiers pass. Their steps were steady, predictable, disciplined. He found something calming in their rhythm. Order, at least on the surface. Yet beneath that order, he felt something unsettled. Not fear for his safety. Fear for balance. Rome had always lived in tension, between Senate and general, between tradition and ambition, between old law and new power. It was a structure held together not by stillness, but by constant negotiation. And negotiation required equality. He wondered, quietly, without drama, whether equality still existed. A memory surfaced. Years earlier, standing in the forum as a younger man, listening to debates that stretched long into the afternoon. Voices raised, then lowered. Compromise formed slowly, like clay shaped by patient hands. It had felt imperfect, but shared. Now, as the procession moved farther down the street, Marcus noticed how people stepped aside without being asked. How conversations stopped mid-sentence. How even those who disapproved did so softly. Power had shifted from discussion to presence. He became aware of his own breathing. Slow, measured. He was not a senator, not a soldier, not a man whose name would ever travel beyond his district. His life was contained within the rhythm of markets, meals, and seasonal changes. And yet, the direction of the Republic would shape the price of grain, the safety of roads, the certainty of tomorrow. He felt small, but not separate. Behind him, Livia stepped closer, though she did not speak. Her presence steadied the space. The fountain continued its gentle repetition, indifferent to history unfolding beyond the walls. Marcus lowered his gaze from the street. He looked instead at the mosaic beneath his feet, tiny stones arranged carefully into pattern. Each piece insignificant alone, stable only when placed beside others. Rome was like that, or had been. The procession's sound began to fade toward the forum. The crowd thinned slowly, like a tide withdrawing. The day would continue. But Marcus sensed, without fully understanding why, that something invisible had crossed a threshold along with Julius Caesar. Not noise, not chaos, just a quiet rearrangement of weight. And he wondered, with a calm he did not entirely trust, what shape Rome would take next. The sound of the procession faded completely. What remained was mourning. Marcus stood for a moment longer, then stepped back into the courtyard. The brightness outside felt sharper than it needed to be. Inside, the light was filtered, gentler, softened by columns and leaves. Livia resumed her place at the low table. Nothing in her movements suggested urgency. She adjusted the bread plate slightly, as though correcting a small imbalance. The gesture was simple, familiar. Marcus sat. He exhaled, not dramatically, not heavily, just enough to release what had gathered in his chest. Beyond the walls, Rome had already begun returning to itself. The market sounds resumed their layered rhythm. A vendor called out prices. Someone laughed. A donkey protested briefly before falling quiet. Life did not pause for long, even when powerful men walked its streets. Marcus dipped a piece of bread into olive oil. The surface shimmered in the sunlight. He ate slowly, tasting salt and grain and warmth. The city would speak of Caesar all day. In shaded corners of the forum. In bathhouses thick with steam. In private rooms behind closed doors. But here, in this small courtyard, the fountain still flowed at the same pace it had yesterday. The fig leaves cast shifting patterns across the mosaic. A bee drifted lazily near the rim of a clay bowl, circled once, then moved on. Marcus found comfort in these small consistencies. Empires moved in great arcs. But days, real days, moved in inches. He looked upward briefly. The sky was clear. No sign of storm. No omen written in clouds. Just light. He realized something quiet and steady. Whatever shape power took in the forum, he would still rise tomorrow. Bread would still bake. Water would still cool the skin. Evening would still come. Rome was vast, but it was also intimate. And for now, this courtyard remained unchanged. Marcus leaned back slightly, letting the warmth settle across his shoulders. The morning had stretched itself fully open, and the day, like so many before it, continued, calm, unhurried, sufficient. The street outside no longer demanded attention. Its sounds blended into a distant texture, present, but softened by walls and distance. Inside the domus, the air felt cooler again, shaded from the rising sun. Livia moved toward her weaving frame. The loom stood near the inner wall, where light entered gently but did not glare. Threads stretched vertically in calm, even lines. Pale linen. Soft ochre. A muted red like sun-warmed clay. She sat. The first motion was almost soundless. Thread passed over and under. A wooden shuttle moved from one hand to the other. The pattern grew slowly, not dramatic, not intricate, just steady. A fabric meant for daily use. Durable. Quiet. Marcus remained nearby, seated on a low bench. He did not speak. Instead, he listened to the rhythm of the loom. The faint wooden click as the thread settled into place. The soft pull that tightened each line evenly. The repetition was gentle, like breathing made audible. Sunlight shifted slightly across the floor. It reached the edge of the mosaic fountain, brightened the water for a moment, then continued its slow climb along the wall. A small breeze entered through the open courtyard. It moved the hanging linen slightly, cooled the back of Marcus's neck, then passed on without insistence. Livia's hands did not hurry. Each motion was measured, practiced, calm. Marcus watched the fabric grow row by row. He found comfort in seeing something take form gradually, something that did not depend on politics or rumor or the presence of powerful men. Just thread. Just hands. In the kitchen space, a clay pot cooled completely. The faint scent of baked bread still lingered. Somewhere deeper in the house, a wooden chest settled with a quiet creak as the temperature shifted. Nothing demanded urgency. Nothing required decision. The loom continued. Over. Under. Pull. Over. Under. Pull. Marcus felt his breathing match the rhythm. Outside, Rome expanded into noon. Inside, time slowed. The courtyard held its pool of light. The fig leaves made small shifting shadows. The fountain maintained its steady whisper. The world beyond the walls could rearrange itself as it wished. Here, in this small house, morning passed gently through human hands. And the day remained calm. The rhythm of the loom continued. Over. Under. Pull. Over. Under. Pull. Marcus felt the sound settle into him. Not as noise, but as pattern. His shoulders lowered slightly. The warmth of the courtyard wrapped around him without pressure. His eyelids grew heavier, not with exhaustion, with permission. He leaned his head back against the wall. The stone was cool. The contrast between sun-warmed air and shaded marble created a quiet balance around him. Livia did not stop weaving. She noticed his stillness, but she did not disturb it. The shuttle moved again. Over. Under. Pull. Marcus's breathing slowed. The fountain continued its steady trickle. And without any clear boundary, the world shifted. He is walking. Not in haste. Not toward anything urgent. The street beneath his feet is familiar, but wider than usual. The stones are smooth, untouched by crowd or cart. The sky above is pale, neither morning nor evening. A suspended light. There are no voices, no soldiers, no markets, only space. He walks past the forum, but it is empty, not abandoned, simply resting. The columns stand tall and quiet. Banners hang without wind. He does not feel alone. He feels unobserved. The air carries the faint scent of grain and sun-warmed stone. In the distance, he sees the Tiber. The river is calm, smoother than he has ever known it to be. Its surface reflects the sky perfectly, like polished bronze. He approaches slowly. There is no urgency in his steps. When he reaches the water's edge, he looks down. Instead of his reflection, he sees movement beneath the surface. Small mosaic tiles, thousands of them, suspended in the water. They drift gently, rearranging themselves without hands, forming patterns, breaking apart, forming again. A city made of pieces, never fixed, always becoming. Marcus kneels by the river. He places his hand near the surface, not touching it, just hovering. The tiles beneath align briefly into a familiar courtyard. A fig tree, a fountain, a woven cloth drying in sunlight. Then the image softens, dissolves back into color and motion. He feels no fear, only recognition. The river continues to move, though so slowly it almost appears still. Above him, the sky grows slightly warmer in tone. Not brighter, just warmer. He stands again, and continues walking. The scene shifts without break. Now he is older, not dramatically, just slightly. His hair carries more silver. His hands are the same, but slower. He stands in the courtyard of his own house, but it is quieter than before. The loom is still. The fountain still flows, but the fig tree is larger, its trunk thicker, its branches wider. Light filters through leaves that seem more numerous. He hears laughter, soft, familiar, not from outside the walls, from within them. He turns, but instead of seeing clearly, he sees light. Warm afternoon light filling the doorway. The laughter fades into the sound of wind in leaves. He does not feel loss. He feels distance, like watching a memory from far away. He sits beneath the fig tree. The mosaic beneath him is incomplete, a small section unfinished. Loose tiles rest beside it, waiting. He picks one up. Simple, small. He places it gently into the pattern. It fits. The image becomes whole. The dream does not end. It simply widens. Now there is no city, no forum, no river. Only light moving across open fields beyond Rome. Golden grain bending gently in wind. The sky vast, unmarked by politics or procession. Marcus walks slowly between rows of tall grass. His hand brushes the tops lightly. The sound is like distant whispering, steady and continuous. The sun is low, but not setting, just resting near the horizon. He feels lighter here, not because responsibility is gone, but because time feels wide. There is space enough for everything. He lies down among the grain. The stalks move around him in slow rhythm. The sky above deepens into soft amber. His breathing matches the wind. In the distance, bells from the city ring faintly, but they do not disturb him. They blend into the air. Back in the courtyard, in the present, Marcus remains seated against the cool stone wall. His breathing steady. The loom continues. Over, under, pull. The fountain answers, and the afternoon begins to lean gently toward evening. Marcus does not rise from the field. Instead, the field dissolves slowly, not disappearing, but thinning. The grain becomes lighter. The sky becomes paler, and without any sensation of falling, he finds himself once again beside the river. But this time, he is not standing above it. He is within it. The water is not cold. It is not warm. It simply surrounds him. He does not need to breathe. Light filters down from the surface in long, quiet beams. Dust-like particles drift in slow suspension. The current is almost imperceptible, a movement so gradual it could be mistaken for stillness. Below him, the mosaic tiles are clearer now. They do not rush. They do not collide. They move apart from one another with patient intention. A single white tile rotates slowly in place. It completes one full turn over several long seconds. Another tile, deep red, drifts closer, then stops. Marcus reaches out. His hand moves slowly through the water, without resistance. When his fingers approach a tile, it does not flee. It does not react. He touches it. Marcus remains beneath the surface of the river. The water does not press against him in any urgent way. It does not insist upon its presence. Rather, it surrounds him with a kind of patient neutrality, as though it has existed long before him and will continue long after, without attachment to his brief suspension within it. The light above is neither bright nor dim. It is diffused, stretched thin across the surface, then filtered downward through shifting layers of current so gradual that one might watch for several minutes before being certain that anything has moved at all. Small particles drift past his face. They are not debris. They are not sand. They are simply minute fragments of the river itself, nearly invisible unless observed carefully. And Marcus observes them carefully. Each one follows a path so slight, so restrained, that its direction cannot immediately be determined. One fragment descends, pauses, then inclines slightly to the left, as if reconsidering its previous decision. Another remains suspended in one position for so long that it begins to seem fixed, until, after an extended stillness, it continues its descent by a distance no greater than the width of a fingernail. Below him, the mosaic tiles continue their slow rearrangement. They do not form pictures quickly. They hesitate. A pale tile drifts toward a darker one. It does not touch. It stops just short, remaining in that delicate proximity for a long interval. During this time, nothing else in the scene asserts itself. The water remains calm. The light remains diffused. Marcus does not move. At last, almost imperceptibly, the pale tile rotates a fraction of a degree. Not enough to announce change. Only enough to suggest it. The riverbed, if it can be called that, does not appear solid. It is composed entirely of these drifting pieces. They do not settle into permanence. They hover in a condition of possibility. Marcus lowers himself slightly. His descent is not dramatic. It occurs with the same gentle inevitability as dusk entering a room. His garments do not float wildly. They remain close to him, responding only to the most modest suggestions of current. He extends his hand once more. The motion requires no effort. When his fingers approach a small blue tile, faded at its edges, as though worn by years of quiet contact, he does not grasp it immediately. He allows his hand to remain open beside it, observing. The tile rotates. Slowly. So slowly that its change of orientation becomes noticeable only when compared to a memory of its earlier position. Marcus closes his fingers around it. The contact produces no sound, no shock, no ripple of significance. It is simply a meeting of surfaces. Smooth against smooth. And yet, in that contact, something alters. The surrounding tiles begin to align. Not rapidly, not decisively, but with the hesitant cooperation of elements that have finally recognized a shared direction. A faint pattern emerges. Not a full image. Merely the suggestion of straight lines. Marcus does not hurry this process. He waits. Time in the river does not measure itself in minutes. It stretches into longer units, into observation, into attention. The light above shifts slightly warmer. The particles continue their descent. And in the quiet architecture of water, beneath the muted ceiling of the river's surface, the mosaic gathers itself, not into spectacle, not into revelation, but into the slow and almost reluctant formation of order. Marcus remains, still, suspended, watching as pieces that once drifted without intention begin, with extraordinary patience, to resemble something that might one day become a floor beneath steady feet. The tile is smooth, cool, weightless. Marcus does not attempt to rise from the river. Indeed, the notion of rising, of moving upward toward the thinning light above, does not occur to him as something necessary or even desirable. The surface remains visible, a distant trembling boundary between two kinds of silence, yet it exerts no pull upon him. If anything, it appears fragile, almost uncertain, like a thought not yet fully formed. Below him, the suspended mosaic continues its nearly imperceptible labor. There is no architect directing it, no guiding hand, no voice issuing instruction. The tiles exist in a condition of mild separation, each distinct, each self-contained, and yet gradually, with such slowness that the word gradually itself seems hurried, they incline toward alignment. A long, rectangular piece of muted ochre drifts closer to three smaller white fragments. It does not meet them directly. Instead, it positions itself parallel at a modest distance, as though testing the possibility of relation without yet committing to it. For a prolonged interval, long enough that one might reasonably assume nothing further will occur, it remains there. Marcus observes this hesitation. His body remains suspended without strain. His arms hang loosely at his sides. His garments, having surrendered to the neutrality of the water, no longer assert any shape of their own. They have become extensions of stillness. The light shifts again. It does not brighten in any dramatic sense. Rather, its tone alters subtly, as if a thin veil has been drawn across it. The beams descending from the surface elongate, becoming more diffuse. Their edges blur. The particles within them appear momentarily more visible, then less so, depending upon the angle of observation. Marcus turns his head slightly. The motion is so restrained that it disturbs no current. He notices now that the tiles are not identical in age. Some bear faint traces of wear, softened corners, edges dulled by imagined years of contact. Others appear sharper, newer, as though recently shaped. The coexistence of these conditions does not create tension. It simply exists as fact. He extends his hand once more, not to grasp, not to arrange, but merely to introduce proximity. As his palm nears a cluster of darker pieces, deep red, almost brown, they do not scatter. They seem, instead, to adjust minutely, accommodating the presence of his hand without yielding to it. The rectangular ochre tile, after its long deliberation, shifts closer to the white fragments. It rotates by a fraction so slight that only a patient eye could detect it. Then another fraction. Then stillness. Eventually, though the word eventually implies a swiftness that does not belong here, the edges align. Not perfectly, but sufficiently. A line forms. It is not yet a border, not yet a structure, only a suggestion of direction, faint and almost apologetic in its emergence. Marcus feels no triumph at this development. He does not smile. He does not think. His awareness spreads outward, encompassing not only the forming line but the vast field of remaining fragments that continue their solitary drift. Time lengthens. The concept of before and after loosens its grip. He becomes aware that the water itself possesses layers. Slight variations in density create currents so subtle that they cannot be felt, only inferred by observing the slow migration of the smallest particles. One layer carries motion leftward. Another, scarcely distinguishable from it, inclines gently downward. The tiles respond differently depending on which layer surrounds them. Some descend by increments almost too small to measure. Others hover indefinitely, as though undecided. Marcus lowers himself another small degree. There is no sensation of sinking, only relocation. As he descends, the light thins further. Colors mute. Reds become softer. Whites take on a faint gray cast. The ochre line, newly formed, appears less distinct, though its alignment remains. He considers, though the thought is not verbal, that this is how cities are made. Not in the noise of proclamation. Not in the clash of ambition. but in the quiet adjacency of pieces that, through long coexistence, discover the modest geometry of belonging. The river does not applaud this insight. It does not confirm it. It continues. A larger tile, pale blue, veined faintly with white, drifts downward from above. Its descent is slow enough that Marcus can observe its entire journey. It does not fall straight. It inclines slightly, correcting itself over time, until it approaches the newly formed line. For a long while, it remains above it. Then, without haste, it settles just beside the ochre rectangle. Not locking into place. Not final. Merely resting. The surrounding fragments shift almost imperceptibly to accommodate this addition. A faint curve begins to suggest itself. Marcus does not attempt to complete it. Completion would imply urgency. Instead, he remains suspended within this underwater expanse of patient reconfiguration, watching as the smallest adjustments, rotations of less than a degree, descents of less than a finger's width, accumulate into the faint outline of something that might, in another hour or another lifetime, resemble a courtyard floor warmed by afternoon sun. Above, the surface trembles faintly. Below, the mosaic continues. And Marcus, freed from the need to influence or interpret, allows himself to exist within the prolonged and almost ceremonial slowness of becoming. Marcus remains within the water, though even the word "within" begins to lose its precision, for the boundary that once distinguished his body from the surrounding current has grown increasingly uncertain, softened by prolonged stillness and by the gradual surrender of sensation to continuity. The surface above him is still faintly visible, yet the idea of above no longer carries the firmness it once did. Light continues to descend from that distant trembling plane, but direction itself appears gently curved, as though time has bent and taken space along with it. The mosaic fragments persist in their movement. Yet the movement is no longer strictly downward, nor lateral, nor obedient to any simple notion of gravity. A fragment that earlier had drifted imperceptibly toward the dim suggestion of a forming line now hesitates, then inclines backward, retracing its path with such delicacy that the reversal can be detected only by a mind trained in patience. Marcus observes this without surprise. Surprise would require abruptness. And nothing here is abrupt. A dark red piece, matte and slightly worn along its edges, withdraws from its former proximity to the ochre rectangle. The separation unfolds so gradually that the growing space between them feels less like departure and more like the slow widening of a breath. Marcus lifts his hand. The motion takes time. His fingers travel through the water not as objects displacing liquid, but as shapes participating in it. The current does not part dramatically. It accommodates him with minimal adjustment, as though his gesture had been anticipated long before it occurred. He holds his hand above a small opening within the forming pattern. The opening is modest, scarcely larger than the width of his palm, yet it possesses a distinct presence. It is not emptiness in the ordinary sense. It is possibility suspended. Above, the light thins further. Colors withdraw into themselves. Whites lose their clarity and adopt a faint gray softness. Blues deepen toward dusk without darkening entirely. Reds become less assertive, as though modesty has replaced vibrancy. Time elongates. It does not pass. It extends. For an interval so prolonged that it ceases to be measurable, Marcus perceives, not in a flash, but in a gradual superimposition, a younger version of himself. The younger Marcus walks along the riverbank. His steps are slowed to the same patient tempo as the drifting tiles. 1 foot lifts, the motion endures. It lowers. The contact with earth unfolds in stages, as though even the ground must consider the weight it receives. The younger face is indistinct, wavering slightly as though viewed through a thin layer of water. Yet the posture is recognizable, upright, attentive, uncertain in a way that has not yet learned resignation. The two figures do not confront one another. They coexist. The younger Marcus bends and selects a tile from the shore. It is sharper-edged than the pieces below the surface, newer, less worn by contact and time. The older Marcus watches. There is no regret in him, no longing, only observation. The water deepens in tone, though not in darkness. Rather, it becomes denser with nuance. Subtle strata of current reveal themselves through the drifting of smaller particles. One layer inclines slightly leftward. Another, almost indistinguishable from it, carries a faint downward suggestion. The fragments respond differently depending on which layer embraces them. Some advance toward the emerging spiral. Others hesitate indefinitely, neither joining nor departing. Yes, a spiral. What had once resembled a hesitant line now curves, almost shyly, into a broad and patient rotation. It does not narrow toward a center. It widens, expanding outward in a gesture that suggests continuation rather than completion. Marcus lowers himself slightly. There is no sensation of sinking, only reorientation. As he descends, the spiral becomes clearer in its structure, yet softer in its edges. Each fragment rotates by fractions so minute that one might watch for an extended duration before confirming that movement has occurred at all. A small gray tile, nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding tones, drifts toward what appears to be the spiral's center. It pauses. For a long while, long enough for the notion of center to feel unstable, nothing happens. Then the center shifts. Not dramatically, merely by the width of a single fragment. The spiral does not complete itself. Completion would imply urgency, and urgency has no authority here. Marcus becomes aware that the water is no longer a medium but a condition. He is not submerged within it. He is suspended within time itself, and time, having relinquished its straight line, now moves in quiet rotation. Slowly, endlessly, without demand. The river recedes without drama. There is no transition, no ripple, no sensation of waking. Marcus is simply seated once more in his courtyard. It is late afternoon. The sun has shifted from its height and now rests at an angle that stretches shadows across the mosaic floor. The fig tree casts a longer shape than it did earlier in the day, its leaves trembling only slightly in a mild and unhurried breeze. The fountain continues to flow. Its sound is steady, consistent, almost indistinguishable from silence once the ear accepts it. Marcus sits on the same low bench. His hands rest loosely on his knees. His shoulders are neither tense nor heavy. They simply exist in their natural position. Across the courtyard, Livia is no longer weaving. The loom stands still. The threads remain stretched in quiet parallel lines, holding the work exactly where it was left. Nothing has unraveled. Nothing has changed. A clay bowl rests on the small wooden table beside him. Inside it are a few figs, split open. Their deep red interiors catch the angled light, appearing darker near the seeds and lighter toward the edges. A thin film of dust has settled along the rim of the bowl, not noticeable unless one looks closely. Marcus does not reach for the figs. He watches the movement of light. It progresses slowly across the wall, illuminating small imperfections in the plaster. A faint crack. A place where the color is slightly warmer. A tiny shadow formed by the uneven surface. Outside the walls of the domus, the city continues its afternoon rhythm. Voices drift in and out. A cart rolls past at an ordinary pace. The wooden wheels produce a sound that is neither sharp nor loud, just the dull contact of wood against stone. Somewhere nearby, someone shakes out a piece of fabric. The soft flap echoes once, then fades. Marcus leans his head back slightly. The stone behind him has absorbed the day's warmth. It is not hot. It is simply comfortable. He closes his eyes, not because he is tired, but because the light has grown softer. Behind his closed eyelids, there is no dramatic vision, only a faint reddish glow. The sound of the fountain becomes more distinct when sight withdraws. Each drop is spaced in calm intervals, not mechanical, not rhythmic in a strict sense, just steady. His breathing slows. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. A leaf detaches from the fig tree. It does not fall quickly. It turns once in the air, then settles on the mosaic floor near the edge of the fountain basin. No one reacts. Nothing changes because of it. The afternoon continues to lower itself toward evening. The sky above the courtyard shifts almost imperceptibly in color. Blue softens toward pale gold. The shadows lengthen further, but without urgency. Marcus remains seated, still, breathing evenly. The loom remains untouched. The bowl of figs remains where it is. The fountain continues, and the day, without announcement or demand, moves quietly forward. The dream thins. Not abruptly. Not like mist burned away by sun. It simply becomes lighter, less defined, until the shapes within it no longer insist on being followed. Marcus inhales. The breath is deeper than the ones before it. His eyelids move slightly, then open. The courtyard is exactly as it was. The light has shifted only a little. It is still afternoon. The fig tree still casts its patterned shadow across the mosaic floor. The fountain continues its steady and untroubled sound. For a moment, Marcus does not move. He does not try to remember the dream. He does not try to hold it. Whatever images were there dissolve quietly, like footprints in dust that are not meant to last. He blinks once. The air feels mild against his face. Across the courtyard, Livia is still at the loom. The shuttle moves from one side to the other with the same unhurried rhythm as before. Over, under, pull, over, under, pull. Nothing in her posture suggests that time has passed differently for him than for her. A small shift of wind enters the courtyard. It moves the hanging threads slightly, then settles. Marcus straightens slowly from the wall. The stone behind him has cooled a little as the sun continues its descent. He places his hands on his knees and presses lightly, rising without effort. There is no urgency in his movement. He walks toward the fountain. The water reflects the sky, now softer in tone. He dips his fingers into the basin. The surface breaks into small, widening circles that reach the edge and return. The water is cool. He lifts his hand and lets the droplets fall back. Each drop makes a quiet sound. Separate. Clear. Livia looks up briefly. Not questioning. Simply acknowledging. Marcus nods once, almost imperceptibly. He feels rested. Not deeply changed. Not enlightened. Just rested. Outside the walls, the afternoon continues in its ordinary way. A vendor calls out the price of olives. A child runs past, sandals striking stone in quick succession. Somewhere, a door closes. The world has not shifted. The Republic has not collapsed. The city remains. Marcus returns to the bench. This time, he does not lean back fully. He sits upright, watching the sunlight slide lower along the wall. The day is moving toward evening. Slowly, predictably, and within the small courtyard, there is nothing to resolve. Only the quiet continuation of hours. The courtyard door closes with a softened wooden sound. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the quiet meeting of old wood and worn stone. Outside, the street carries a different kind of stillness. It is not silent, but it is orderly. Movement exists, yet nothing rushes. The stone pavement has held the sun's warmth all day. Now, as the afternoon begins its slow descent, the heat rises gently from the surface. Between the stones, thin lines of dust gather. Small blades of grass push upward in narrow cracks, some bent under passing sandals, others still upright. At the corner, an elderly man sits on a low wooden stool repairing a leather sandal. His back is slightly curved, not from weakness but from long habit. A small metal tool rests between his fingers as he smooths the edge of a strap. The leather bends obediently beneath his touch. Occasionally he lifts his head, watching the rhythm of the street, then lowers it again without hurry. Across from him, large wooden barrels of olives stand open in front of a narrow shop. The brine at the surface trembles faintly whenever someone passes too closely. The rims of the barrels are darkened from years of use, their insides polished by salt and time. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged woman with steady hands, wipes her counter with a cloth already clean. She adjusts the balance scale, aligns small clay bowls, and greets neighbors with brief nods that require no words. A child moves along the street, pushing a wooden hoop with a thin stick. The hoop wobbles, corrects itself, and continues forward. The boy adjusts his pace to match its movement. One of his sandals is slightly loose, it makes a soft tapping sound against stone. When the hoop finally slows and tips to the side, he crouches to examine a small insect crossing the warm pavement. He watches it carefully, as though it carries some quiet importance. Further down, two women sit just outside a doorway, spinning wool. The fibers stretch between their fingers, thinning into thread. The spindle turns with patient consistency. Their conversation drifts like light smoke, unurgent, almost weightless. The market was crowded this morning. The figs are smaller this year. The rain last week helped the soil. Their voices remain low. The thread grows longer. Above them, the sky begins its gradual change. The sun lowers and paints the upper edges of buildings in a softened gold. Window frames catch the light and reflect it back in narrow strips. A small flock of pigeons lifts from a rooftop, wings brushing the air in a brief rush before settling again out of sight. Nothing interrupts the order of the afternoon. Nothing insists on attention. The bakery at the corner. At the far end of the street, a small bakery remains open. Its doorway stands wide, allowing warmth to spill outward. The interior is thick with the scent of flour and wood smoke. Inside, a stone oven glows steadily. The mouth of it is darkened with soot, but the fire within burns in a consistent orange. The baker works without wasted movement. He lifts a long wooden paddle and slides shaped rounds of dough into the heat. The dough rests for a moment in stillness. Then, slowly, it begins to rise. The surface tightens. A faint line forms across the top. Steam presses outward, creating a gentle crack along the crust. The baker's face shines with perspiration, but he does not appear strained. He pauses occasionally to step outside, drawing a long breath of cooler air before returning to the steady warmth within. A woman approaches carrying a simple cloth bag. When the bread is placed inside, she presses lightly against its crust. It gives beneath her touch and springs back. She nods once, satisfied. Soon, the scent travels beyond the doorway. It settles into the street. Warm grain. Dry heat. A faint char along the edges. No one comments on it directly. Yet everyone notices. By the river path. Beyond the outer walls of the city, near a narrow river, several men sit repairing fishing nets. The river moves at its own measured pace. Water folds over stones, forming small patterns of white before smoothing itself again. Reflections of drifting clouds travel across the surface, stretched and reshaped by the current. The men examine each section of net carefully. Broken threads are retied with precise knots. Their fingers are rough from years of contact with rope and water. Conversation is sparse. One young man lifts a flat stone and throws it across the surface. It skips twice before disappearing beneath the water. No one remarks on it. It is simply a small gesture within a larger, unremarkable day. The approach of evening. Gradually, the light changes again. Shadows lengthen and merge. The sharp edges of buildings soften. Wooden shutters are pulled inward one by one. Metal rings strike lightly against stone as doors close for the evening. Inside homes, modest meals are prepared. Lentils simmer in clay pots. Garlic touches oil and releases a quiet fragrance. Bread is torn by hand rather than cut. Families sit close together around low tables. Their conversations are simple summaries of the day. It was warm. The barrels need refilling. We will wake early tomorrow. These sentences carry no weight beyond themselves, and yet they are enough. For a brief interval before full darkness settles, the city exists in a suspended calm, not fully awake, not yet asleep. A woman pauses at her window, watching the sky fade. A man aligns his sandals neatly beside the door. A child lies on a woven mat, tracing faint cracks in the ceiling with his eyes. None of them are extraordinary. None of them are central to history. But together, in this slow descent of evening, they form the quiet continuity of the city. And the day closes not with drama, but with completion. Night does not fall all at once. It settles gradually, like a thin fabric lowered over the city. In a larger house near the inner forum, a merchant named Cashin remains awake long after the street has quieted. His home is built around a rectangular atrium where a shallow pool collects rainwater from the open roof above. The surface of the water now reflects a narrow slice of darkening sky. Oil lamps burn along the walls. Their flames bend slightly whenever a draft moves through the open space. Cashin sits at a wooden table marked with years of careful use. In front of him lie wax tablets. The surface of the wax is faintly scarred from previous accounts erased and rewritten. He holds a stylus loosely, reviewing numbers scratched into neat columns. Grain shipments. Olive oil deliveries. 2 amphorae lost during river transport. He does not rush through the figures. He traces each line with his eyes, occasionally pressing the flat end of the stylus to smooth the correction into the wax. The small motion leaves the faint scent of warmed resin in the air. Across the atrium, his wife folds linen cloth that had dried during the day. The fabric holds the memory of sunlight. She aligns the edges carefully, smoothing each crease with the palm of her hand before stacking them in even piles. Their movements share the same rhythm, though they speak little. From the street outside comes the distant echo of a cart wheel turning over stone. Then quiet again. Cashin pauses, leans back slightly, and listens, not for anything specific, but for the measure of the night. Satisfied, he sets the stylus down. The numbers can wait until morning. Trade is important, but not urgent at this hour. He extinguishes one lamp, then another. Shadows expand gently across the walls on the opposite side of the city, near the outer gate. The barracks hold a different kind of silence. The soldiers are not speaking. They are resting in ordered rows, their gear placed carefully at the foot of each bed. A young soldier named Lucius lies awake for a moment longer than the others. The wooden ceiling above him is plain. A small crack runs from one beam to the next. He studies it without intention. His armor, polished earlier in the evening, rests on a stand nearby. The metal catches the dim lantern light and reflects it softly. His sandals are positioned side by side beneath the frame of his cot. Lucius does not think of battle. There is none scheduled. The border has been quiet for months. Instead, his thoughts drift to ordinary things: the vineyard near his father's house, the smell of crushed grapes in late summer, the weight of a bucket filled too high. A fellow soldier turns in his sleep. The straw mattress shifts with a muted rustle. Outside, the night guard walks the perimeter wall. Each step is deliberate. The iron tip of his spear touches stone with a steady, repeating sound. Lucius exhales slowly. The barracks hold their shape in the darkness. Long before the sky begins to pale, a single room near the lower quarter shows a faint glow. The potter is awake. His workshop smells of clay and ash. Rows of unfinished bowls line a wooden shelf, their surfaces dull and cool. In the corner, the kiln rests from yesterday's firing, its bricks still holding a trace of warmth. He kneels beside a basin of water and wets his hands. The clay responds immediately beneath his palms, firm yet pliable. He places a rounded lump onto the center of the wheel and begins to turn it. The wheel hums quietly as it rotates. His thumbs press downward. The clay opens. His fingers lift gently upward. The walls of the vessel rise. There is no audience, no applause, only the steady shaping of form from formlessness. Outside, the sky begins its almost imperceptible transition. The darkest blue softens slightly near the horizon. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the houses. The potter finishes one bowl and sets it aside. It is neither ornate nor grand. It will hold oil or grain or water. It will chip one day. It may break. But for now, it is complete. As dawn approaches, the city stirs before it fully wakes. A woman opens her shutters halfway and inhales the cooler morning air. The scent of damp stone replaces the warmth of yesterday's heat. A baker rekindles embers left from the night before, coaxing flame from what appears almost extinguished. A stable boy brushes dust from a horse's flank. The animal shifts its weight but does not resist. The sky moves from deep blue to gray, then to a faint wash of pale gold along the eastern edge. No trumpet announces the day. No signal is given. It simply arrives. And once again, the city resumes its quiet circulation of tasks and gestures. The sandal maker will return to his stool. The olive barrels will be uncovered. The nets by the river will be lifted and examined. Cassian will reopen his tablets. Lucius will rise with the others. The potter will shape another bowl. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing destined for inscription in marble. Yet together, these small repetitions create the true structure of the city, stronger than stone walls, steadier than politics, quieter than glory. And so the day begins again, not as a new story, but as the continuation of the same one. Marcus wakes before the sun fully rises. Not because he must, but because the light changes. The darkness of the room thins slowly. The open section of the roof above the courtyard allows the first gray hint of dawn to descend like diluted ink. The air is cooler than it was the night before. It rests lightly on his skin. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the neighboring walls. Another answers. Marcus opens his eyes. For a few breaths, he remains still, listening to the subtle rearranging of the world. A clay jar settles with a faint tick as the temperature shifts. Wood beams contract, almost imperceptibly. From outside, someone coughs once, then silence returns. He pushes himself upright. The woven mat beneath him presses faint lines into his palm. He runs his hand across it once, flattening a crease that does not truly need flattening. When his feet touch the stone floor, he inhales slightly at the coolness. The stone has released the heat of yesterday and holds the memory of night. He stands. No urgency. No plan spoken aloud. Only the quiet acceptance of another day that will resemble the one before it. In the courtyard, Livia is drawing water from the cistern beneath the open roof. The rope slides against stone with a familiar texture of sound. Not harsh. Not soft. Just consistent. Marcus takes the bucket when she lifts it. The water is clear, faintly reflective. He pours some into a shallow basin and washes his face. The cold shocks him only for a moment. He rubs his beard slowly, smoothing it with deliberate fingers. He runs his hands over his arms, waking the skin. A small swallow lands briefly on the edge of the roof opening, tilts its head, then disappears again. The sky above shifts from gray to a pale, diluted blue. The morning meal is simple. Yesterday's bread, slightly firm at the edges. A shallow dish of olive oil. A small bowl of olives, darker now from brine. Marcus tears the bread with both hands. The crust cracks softly. He dips a piece into oil and eats without speaking. The flavor is steady and familiar. Grain, salt, faint bitterness from the olives. Livia sits opposite him. Their conversation is minimal. The air is cooler. Yes, that is good. It is enough. They do not need more words to confirm the shape of the morning. Marcus works with wood, not as a master craftsman known beyond the city, but as a reliable maker of practical things: stools, tool handles, small storage chests, door repairs. Objects that will be used daily and rarely admired. His tools hang on a simple wall inside a shaded workspace near the courtyard. He lifts one chisel and runs his thumb lightly along its edge. Not to test its sharpness fully. He knows it well, but to acknowledge it. A plank of wood rests on two supports. He begins. The first cuts are slow, measured. The blade moves through the grain, releasing a scent that is dry and clean. Small curls fall to the ground, collecting at his feet. The rhythm establishes itself naturally. Press, draw, lift, adjust. He pauses occasionally to examine the direction of the grain. Wood resists if handled poorly. It cooperates if understood. From the street beyond the walls comes the muted sound of passing carts. Somewhere, a woman calls to a child. The city begins its circulation again. Marcus continues shaping the plank into the leg of a stool. There is no hurry to finish it before midday. It will be finished when it is finished, by midday. The sun stands higher above the open roof. Light falls directly into the courtyard, turning dust in the air into visible threads. Marcus sets his tools aside and wipes his forehead with the back of his arm. Sweat gathers at his temples but does not trouble him. He steps into the shade and drinks from a clay cup filled earlier that morning. The water is no longer cold, but it is sufficient. He sits briefly on the low wall of the courtyard, not resting fully, not thinking deeply, simply existing in the pause between efforts. The swallow returns, landing again on the same edge of roof stone. Marcus watches it for a moment, then stands. The stool leg awaits further shaping, and the day, like all the others, continues without spectacle, formed not by great decisions, but by steady hands repeating what they have always known to do. By late afternoon, when the sharpness of the sun begins to soften and the shadows lengthen into long, patient lines across the stone, Marcus sets his tools aside. The stool leg is nearly complete. Its curve is modest. Its balance is correct. It will not draw attention when placed in a room. It will simply hold weight, as it was made to do. He washes the wood dust from his hands and steps into the street. The air outside carries the mixed scent of baked clay, animals, oil, and distant bread. The city has reached that hour when labor slows but does not fully stop. Voices are lower. Movements are less urgent. Marcus walks toward the forum, not because he must attend to any official matter, but because listening is part of living. The forum is not grand in the way distant capitals are said to be. Its columns are sturdy rather than ornate. The stone beneath them is worn unevenly by years of sandals passing in argument, trade, and idle conversation. Several men stand in loose formation beneath the shade of the portico. They are speaking of politics. Marcus does not enter the circle immediately. He leans lightly against a column, arms folded loosely, posture relaxed. He has no need to dominate the space. He prefers to hear before he speaks. A broad-shouldered man named Gaius speaks first. The council debates the grain levy again, he says, shaking his head slowly. They claim it is temporary. Temporary, another repeats, not with anger, but with the mild skepticism of someone who has heard the word too often. The levy concerns the outer farms. A percentage of harvest redirected to support road repairs and the garrison at the northern gate. Sensible in theory, heavy in practice. Marcus watches the dust drifting through the angled light. Politics, he knows, is rarely about the words spoken aloud. It is about balance. Too much taken from the farmers, and resentment grows like weeds between stones. Too little given to the roads and soldiers, and weakness invites trouble from beyond the hills. He finally speaks. Grain must move, he says evenly. If the roads fail, the market's thin. If the market's thin, no one prospers. But if the levy ignores the drought in the western fields, the burden will not be shared evenly. His voice is not loud. It does not attempt to command. The men nod. Marcus is not a magistrate. He holds no official seal. But he has lived long enough in the city to understand its fragile mechanics. Politics, to him, is not spectacle. It is maintenance. Like repairing a door hinge before it fails. Like reinforcing a stool leg before it splits. A younger man, newly ambitious, steps forward. The magistrate Quintus seeks higher office, he says. He promises reduced tariffs for traders. At this, a few merchants nearby glance up. Reduced tariffs mean more movement of goods. More profit, perhaps. But also less coin flowing into the public treasury. Marcus considers this. Quintus promises what benefits those who listen, he replies calmly. But the treasury feeds the aqueduct, and the aqueduct feeds the city. If he reduces tariffs, he must name what he will reduce in return. The younger man frowns slightly. Marcus continues, not to argue, but to clarify. A promise without subtraction is only sound. A small silence follows. Beyond the forum, a cart rolls past, its wooden wheels turning steadily. Two children chase one another along the edge of the square, unconcerned with levies or tariffs. Marcus watches them briefly. Politics, he reflects, always feels larger than it is when discussed beneath columns. But in the end, it returns to the same simple concerns. Is there water? Is there bread? Are the roads passable? Are the soldiers paid? He does not romanticize leadership. He has seen men rise in popularity for strong speeches, only to falter when faced with practical repair. He has seen quieter officials maintain stability simply by refusing to promise more than can be sustained. The sun lowers further. The shadows from the columns stretch long across the square, dividing light and shade into alternating bands. Gaius sighs. They will vote next week. They will, Marcus agrees. And what do you think will happen? Marcus does not answer immediately. He studies the worn stone beneath his feet, the grooves carved by decades of traffic. The city has survived droughts, disputes, changes of office, even brief unrest. It survives because most citizens wake, work, eat, and sleep without demanding spectacle. I think, Marcus says at last, that the council will argue loudly. Then they will compromise quietly, and the grain will move, and the roads will hold another year. There is no triumph in his tone, only expectation. The men begin to disperse gradually, conversation thinning into smaller fragments. The forum empties not with a conclusion, but with fatigue. Marcus steps away from the column and walks home. As he moves through the dimming streets, he considers how fragile authority truly is. Not because it is weak, but because it depends on agreement more than force. A city stands not only on stone foundations. It stands on consent, on shared inconvenience, on the unspoken decision, made daily, to continue together. When he reaches his courtyard, The sky above is deepening toward evening blue. Livia looks up as he enters. "Were they arguing again?" she asks gently. "They were discussing," Marcus replies. She smiles faintly at the distinction. He washes his hands once more, removing the dust of the forum as he had removed the dust of wood earlier. The city will debate. The council will vote. Promises will be spoken. But tomorrow, Marcus will wake again with a light, touch the cool stone floor, and return to shaping wood. And in that steady repetition, he places more faith than in any speech beneath a column. Marcus walks to the forum without intention of joining anyone. The morning is already warm. Light slides along the columns, revealing small fractures in the stone that most people never notice. Dust gathers at the base of each pillar in pale crescents shaped by wind. He does not stand beneath the shade this time. He remains at the edge of the square. From there, everything can be seen without being seen. A magistrate crosses the open space with measured steps. His sandals strike the stone with restrained rhythm. Two assistants follow half a pace behind, holding wax tablets against their chests. The magistrate's expression does not change as he moves. It is composed, practiced, shaped over years into something unreadable. Marcus watches the way people respond to him. Merchants straighten slightly. A few nod. One man lowers his gaze. Authority moves not only through words, Marcus observes, but through posture. Across the square, a tax collector stands near a wooden table. Coins are placed before him one by one. Each coin produces a distinct sound against the surface, small, metallic, final. Some citizens place their payment without hesitation. Others pause half a breath longer than necessary before releasing their grip. That pause interests Marcus. It is not rebellion. It is resistance contained. A thin thread pulled tight but not yet broken. He shifts his weight slightly against the wall. Near the steps of the council chamber, Quintus appears again. Today he moves more slowly. He stops frequently. His hand rests briefly on shoulders. His head inclines at calculated angles. His mouth forms expressions of concern, agreement, reassurance. Marcus watches the sequence. Gesture. Pause. Listening posture. Hand to chest. Measured nod. It repeats. The performance is subtle enough to appear natural. Marcus does not judge it harshly. He understands its purpose. Power must look attentive. On the far side of the square, two council members stand apart from the others. Their bodies angle toward one another, but their eyes scan outward, alert. Their conversation is low. Their movements minimal. No broad gestures. No theatrical emphasis. Stillness can signal confidence or calculation. Marcus notes how little true motion occurs in positions of authority. Most movement happens among those without it. Laborers cross the square carrying sacks. Children dart between slower bodies. Vendors rearrange goods repeatedly, as if shifting weight on a scale no one sees. The ones in power conserve motion. The ones beneath it generate it. Above the forum, banners hang from wooden beams. They move faintly in the breeze. The fabric edges are frayed, though from a distance they appear whole. Marcus studies the banners longer than the officials. They are symbols. Symbols fade at the edges first, rarely at the center. A cartwheel rolls unevenly across the stone, wobbling slightly where the pavement dips. The sound interrupts the steady rhythm of coin on wood. For a brief moment, attention shifts away from the tax table. Then it returns. Attention is fluid. Authority depends on holding it. Marcus moves slowly along the perimeter of the square. He watches how shadows divide space. Those who stand in full sun appear exposed. Those who remain in shade appear deliberate. The magistrate eventually disappears into the council chamber. The assistants follow. The heavy wooden doors close. When the doors close, the square changes. Conversations thin. Speculation rises. When decisions are made behind walls, imagination fills the silence. Marcus senses it without hearing words. Bodies lean closer together. Gestures become sharper. Eyes narrow slightly. Uncertainty spreads quietly, like dye in water. He turns his gaze toward the northern road beyond the forum. A group of farmers approaches the gate. Their clothing carries dust from the fields. Their shoulders are broader from labor than from leisure. They walk steadily, not hurriedly. Marcus watches their pace. It is neither submissive nor confrontational. It is practical. They carry produce. Produce must move regardless of debate. The city feeds itself through continuity, not rhetoric. The sun climbs higher. Heat gathers on the stone. Officials remain inside. Citizens remain outside. And the city continues breathing in two rhythms. One public, one concealed. Marcus does not step closer to the chamber doors. He does not wait for outcome. He studies instead the invisible structure holding the square together. Expectation, habit, tolerance, shared inconvenience. He understands that politics is not only what is decided inside the chamber. It is the invisible agreement outside it. The choice of each person to return tomorrow, to pay again, to sell again, to build again. He leaves before the doors reopen. As he walks away, the forum grows smaller behind him. The sound of coin fades. The banners continue moving faintly in the wind. And Marcus carries with him not conclusions, but patterns. Because patterns, more than proclamations, reveal the true condition of a republic. Marcus arrives at the forum earlier than most, at that uncertain hour when the square belongs neither to silence nor to movement, when the air still carries the cool residue of night but already anticipates the weight of the coming sun. He does not enter the center of the open space. Instead, he positions himself along the outer wall, where a column casts a narrow band of shade that shifts gradually, almost imperceptibly, across the worn stone pavement. From here, the entire square unfolds before him without requiring his participation. The paving stones are uneven in color, some pale from constant exposure, others darker where shade lingers longer each day. Thin seams of dust trace delicate lines between them, gathering where countless sandals have pressed particles into the cracks over years of repetition. A pair of attendants crosses the square first. Their tunics are clean but not new. The hems brush lightly against their calves as they walk in disciplined alignment, carrying wax tablets pressed flat against their chests. Their expressions are neutral, carefully emptied of opinion, as if even their thoughts must remain private within the geometry of their duties. Behind them, at a measured distance that suggests authority without haste, the magistrate emerges. His steps are deliberate and evenly spaced, neither hurried nor languid. The folds of his garment settle in controlled layers around his legs. His gaze remains forward, rarely shifting to either side, yet fully aware of who watches him pass. Marcus observes how the space responds. Merchants straighten slightly without being instructed. A fruit vendor adjusts his arrangement of figs, though they were already arranged. A young clerk, previously leaning against a wall, shifts upright as if posture itself were a silent form of tribute. Authority, Marcus notes, does not always need to speak in order to be recognized. It reshapes posture. It reorganizes stillness. Near the center of the square, a wooden table has been placed beneath the partial shade of an overhanging beam. Upon it rests a small chest of coin and a wax ledger. The tax collector stands beside it. Coins are set down one by one. Each contact with the wooden surface produces a small, precise sound, brief, metallic, conclusive. The sound repeats at uneven intervals, forming a rhythm that is irregular yet persistent. Some hands release their payment immediately, fingers opening without hesitation. Others hold the coin an instant longer than necessary, as though the metal carries more than value, as though it contains effort, harvest, withheld comfort. That fraction of delay, barely visible, interests Marcus more than the coins themselves. It is in such small pauses that the condition of a city reveals itself. Across the square, Quintus moves through a cluster of citizens with practiced moderation. His gestures are neither expansive nor restrained, they are calibrated. His head inclines at angles that imply attention. His hands remain visible, palms open, resting lightly upon shoulders in brief, reassuring contact. Marcus studies the repetition. Gesture, pause. Listening posture. Measured nod. A faint narrowing of the eyes to indicate consideration. These motions recur with subtle variation, like a pattern woven carefully to avoid appearing woven at all. Quintus never lingers too long in one place. He circulates. Circulation prevents stagnation. Stagnation breeds scrutiny. Marcus shifts his weight slightly against the column as the sun climbs higher. The band of shade retreats slowly, and with it the cooler air. Heat begins to gather on the surface of the stone, rising in soft currents that distort the lower edges of distant figures. Two council members stand apart from the others near the chamber steps. They speak minimally. Their bodies angle toward one another, but their eyes travel outward, scanning the square in silent assessment. Their hands remain still at their sides. No dramatic gestures. No visible agitation. Stillness, Marcus reflects, can signal composure or concealment. The chamber doors remain open for now, revealing a dark interior beyond the threshold. The darkness contrasts sharply with the brightness of the square, creating the impression that decisions, when made, emerge from shadow into light. Gradually, the square fills. Laborers pass through carrying sacks of grain over their shoulders. The coarse fabric leaves faint dust trails behind them. Their movements are purposeful and direct, uninterested in the choreography of officials. Children weave unpredictably between slower bodies, their trajectories forming fleeting disruptions in otherwise orderly patterns. Vendors rearrange goods that do not require rearranging, straightening stacks, polishing surfaces, adjusting balance scales already balanced. Movement belongs to those without authority. Conservation belongs to those who possess it. The magistrate eventually ascends the chamber steps. The attendants follow. The doors close with a heavy wooden sound that echoes briefly against stone and then dissolves into the open air. The moment the doors shut, the square changes. It does not grow louder. It tightens. Bodies incline closer together. Heads tilt inward. Speculation travels invisibly through the space, not in words Marcus can hear, but in posture and proximity. When power withdraws behind walls, imagination expands to fill the absence. Marcus studies the banners suspended above the portico. Their fabric stirs faintly in the shifting air. Up close, the edges are frayed, threads separating gradually from the weave. From a distance, however, they appear intact, symbols whole and untroubled. He considers how institutions resemble those banners. Where begins at the edges, rarely at the center. A cart wheel strikes a depression in the pavement and wobbles briefly before correcting its course. The uneven sound draws several glances, momentarily redirecting attention away from the sealed chamber. Then attention returns to waiting. Waiting, Marcus thinks, is one of the quiet foundations of governance. Citizens wait for verdicts. Officials wait for compliance. Farmers wait for weather. Merchants wait for ships. And beneath all of it lies a fragile, shared expectation that tomorrow will resemble today closely enough to remain tolerable. The sun rises higher. Heat settles fully across the square, pressing downward with steady insistence. Inside the chamber, decisions are being shaped, perhaps altered, perhaps postponed. Outside, the city continues its ordinary circulation. A woman purchases oil. A boy retrieves a dropped coin and returns it reluctantly to his father. A stray dog moves from one strip of shade to another. Marcus does not remain until the doors reopen. He has seen enough. Not conclusions. Not outcomes. But structure. He turns away slowly, walking along the perimeter of the square as the light grows harsher and the shadows shorten beneath him. Behind him, the Forum persists in its quiet tension. Before him, the narrow streets resume their familiar scale. Marcus carries no speech, no allegiance declared aloud. Only the measured understanding that a republic is sustained less by proclamations made within chambers, and more by the silent decision of ordinary people, standing in open squares. To remain, Marcus does not take the narrow streets back toward his courtyard. Instead, he turns toward the outer path that curves gently beyond the northern gate, where the stone gives way to packed earth and the sounds of the square dissolve into distance. The guards at the gate barely notice him. He passes without interruption. Beyond the walls, the air feels wider, less contained. The earth underfoot is dry at the surface, but softer beneath. Each step leaves a faint impression that will disappear with the next wind. Low grasses line the path, their thin blades bending slightly in uneven currents of air that move without pattern. Marcus walks at an unhurried pace. The city remains visible behind him, its stone walls pale in the afternoon light, its rooftops layered in muted clay tones. From this distance, the Forum, the chamber, the banners, the officials, all shrink into indistinguishable geometry. Power, seen from afar, loses its sharp edges. The path descends gradually toward a shallow grove of olive trees. Their trunks are twisted, thick with age, bark split into deep furrows that hold shadow even in bright light. Leaves shimmer silver-green when the wind shifts them, revealing alternating surfaces of dull and reflective color. Marcus steps beneath them. The temperature drops slightly. The ground here is patterned with fallen leaves and small, firm olives that escaped harvest. He nudges one with the edge of his sandal. It rolls briefly before settling into a shallow indentation in the soil. A cicada hums from somewhere unseen. The sound is continuous, almost mechanical, yet entirely organic, rising and falling in subtle waves. Marcus breathes more slowly here. Not deliberately. The body adjusts to open space. Beyond the grove, the land opens into low rolling fields where grain has already been cut. Stubble remains, short and brittle, covering the earth in a pale gold texture that stretches toward the horizon. The sky above is vast and unbroken. No columns, no walls, no chamber doors. Only light, widening and softening as the sun lowers. Marcus walks along the edge of the harvested field. His shadow lengthens beside him, distorted slightly by uneven ground. Small insects lift and settle again as he passes. In the distance, a shepherd guides a small cluster of sheep across a slope. The animals move as one shifting shape, expanding and contracting around invisible cues. Marcus stops for a moment. He listens. Wind across dry grain. Distant animal bells. The faint murmur of the city behind him, barely perceptible now. Out here, decisions made inside stone chambers feel abstract. The earth does not adjust its seasons for decrees. Olive trees do not alter growth for new magistrates. Grain rises or fails according to rain and sun, not speeches. Marcus kneels briefly and presses his palm against the soil. It is warm from the day's heat, but cooling. The warmth is shallow. Beneath it lies deeper coolness, steady and unaffected by the surface. He remains there for several breaths, then rises. The sun approaches the horizon, casting the entire landscape in a muted amber tone. The walls of the city glow softly now, less imposing, almost fragile against the widening sky. Marcus turns back toward them. His pace remains even. As he approaches the gate again, the sounds return gradually. Cart wheels, muted voices, a distant hammer striking metal. The air narrows. Shadows sharpen. Within the walls, movement is more structured. Lines of buildings compress the space. The sky becomes a strip rather than a dome. He re-enters without ceremony. The guards remain in place. The forum lies somewhere deeper within, still containing its quiet negotiations and measured compromises. Marcus does not look toward it. He walks through the familiar streets, past closed shutters and open doorways, past cooking smoke rising in thin vertical lines. By the time he reaches his courtyard, the sky above is a deepening blue, the first stars faint but present. He steps inside. The walls enclose him again. But the memory of open land lingers, not as escape, not as rebellion, but as scale. And in that scale, the city's arguments, its levies, its ambitions, settle into proportion. Marcus washes his hands at the basin. The water cool against skin. The day complete. Not resolved, but balanced. By the time Marcus steps fully into the courtyard, the sky above the open roof has deepened into a layered blue, darker at its highest point and still faintly warm near the horizon where the sun has only recently withdrawn. The air has changed. The heat that pressed down during midday has thinned into something gentler. The stone beneath his feet no longer radiates warmth. Instead, it holds a quiet neutrality, neither warm nor cold, simply present. Inside, a small clay lamp has already been lit. Its flame is modest, contained within a shallow dish of oil. The light does not fill the space evenly. It creates soft gradients, bright along the near wall, dim toward the corners, shadows pooling where the stone meets the floor. Marcus washes at the basin before sitting. The water is cooler now than it was earlier. It runs over his hands and wrists, carrying away dust from the road beyond the walls, faint traces of soil, the fine residue of wood that remains even after hours have passed. Droplets fall back into the basin in small, irregular sounds. He dries his hands on a cloth that smells faintly of sun and storage. The evening meal waits on a low table. There is bread, broken rather than cut. A small bowl of lentils thickened by slow cooking. A shallow dish of olives. A fragment of cheese wrapped in cloth to preserve its firmness. Nothing elaborate. Nothing arranged for display. Marcus sits. He eats without haste. The lentils are warm but no longer steaming. Their texture is soft, almost yielding, with occasional firmer pieces that require more deliberate chewing. The bread absorbs the remaining oil from the dish in uneven patterns, darkening where it touches. Outside the courtyard walls, the city continues in diminishing layers of sound. A cart passes somewhere in the distance. A door closes. Footsteps fade along stone. Each sound arrives muted, softened by evening. Marcus does not rush the meal. He pauses occasionally, not from thought, but from stillness. The body, having moved through fields and forum alike, settles into a slower rhythm. His breathing evens. His shoulders lower slightly from the unconscious tension of observation. Above him, the sky darkens further. The strip of visible blue deepens toward indigo. One star becomes several. They appear gradually, not all at once, each one faint at first, then steady. The oil lamp flickers briefly as a thin draft moves through the courtyard opening. The flame leans, then straightens. When the food is finished, Marcus gathers the simple dishes and sets them aside. He rinses his hands again, more lightly this time. The water surface trembles and then stills. The meal leaves no excess, no abundance, but no lack. The courtyard grows darker. The lamp becomes the primary source of light, its circle of illumination shrinking as the surrounding darkness thickens. The upper walls dissolve into shadow. Only the open square of sky remains clearly visible, now scattered with distant points of white. Marcus stands for a moment at the center of the courtyard and looks upward. The stars appear unmoving, though he knows they shift slowly beyond perception. Their distance places the day's debates, the measured gestures in the forum, the quiet tensions of levy and authority into a scale almost too large to hold. He lowers his gaze. Inside, he prepares his sleeping mat. The woven fibers are firm but familiar. He unrolls it carefully, aligning its edge parallel to the wall. The blanket is folded once, then opened. He smooths it with both hands, pressing out small irregularities as though order at this scale matters. The lamp is lowered slightly. Its flame shrinks. Shadows deepen. Marcus lies down on his side first, then shifts onto his back. The stone floor beneath the mat is cool enough to draw warmth slowly from his body. He exhales. Outside, the city continues its final movements before surrendering fully to night. A faint murmur of distant conversation. The soft call of someone returning home. Then less. Then almost nothing. A dog barks once. Silence follows. Marcus closes his eyes. He does not review the day in sequence. He does not rehearse the magistrate's posture or the shimmer of olive leaves. The images settle on their own, fragmenting gently into indistinct impressions, light across stone, grain stubble under sky, banners stirring faintly in wind. His breathing lengthens. The lamp flame trembles once more and then is extinguished, leaving only the faint glow of starlight filtering from above. Within the enclosed courtyard, darkness is complete but not oppressive. The walls hold the night quietly. Marcus's body releases the final tension of wakefulness. And without ceremony, without declaration, without the memory of speeches or open fields pressing forward, he slips into sleep, as steadily and naturally as the city itself settles into silence around him. The night did not fall suddenly. It gathered itself slowly, like a vast and patient fabric being drawn, inch by inch, across the open sky. What had been pale blue in the late afternoon surrendered first to a diluted gray, then to a muted violet that seemed less a color than a quiet hesitation between light and darkness. Marcus noticed how the fields beyond his home did not resist this change. They accepted it. The grasses, which only hours before had carried the weight of sunlight along their thin blades, now stood in a subdued stillness, their forms dissolving into shadow until they appeared as a single darkened surface breathing almost imperceptibly beneath the cooling air. Inside the house, the evening meal had been modest and unremarkable, as most of his meals were. The table, worn smooth by years of habitual use, held the faint scent of bread and herbs long after he had finished eating. A small oil lamp burned with a restrained and steady flame, its light neither ambitious nor weak, but simply sufficient. It illuminated the grain of the wood in careful detail, revealing the patient lines that time had carved into it. Fine cracks, shallow indentations, the subtle unevenness that comes from decades of quiet service. Marcus ate slowly, not from deliberate mindfulness but from an absence of urgency. There was nowhere to go, no conversation awaiting him, no interruption pressing against the edges of the moment. When he finally extinguished the lamp, the darkness that entered the room was not abrupt. It expanded gently from the corners, filling the space with a depth that felt less like absence and more like a different kind of presence. The house, relieved of light, seemed to settle into itself. Wooden beams adjusted with faint, almost apologetic sounds. The walls, which had absorbed the warmth of the day, began releasing it gradually, allowing the cooler air of night to circulate in thin, invisible currents. Outside, the countryside revealed its nocturnal language. It was not loud. It did not demand attention. From the distant tree-line came the low, measured rhythm of insects, their collective sound forming a continuous thread that stitched the darkness together. Somewhere farther away, an owl released a call that did not echo sharply, but rather dissolved into the surrounding air, as if it had no desire to linger. Small creatures moved through the undergrowth with soft, uncertain rustlings, brief disturbances that faded almost as soon as they began. Marcus lay down without ceremony. The bed, simple and firm, received his weight without protest. Through the open window, the air entered cool and unadorned, carrying with it the scent of soil that had surrendered the day's warmth. The sky, now entirely dark, displayed no urgency in its stars. They appeared distant, steady, and indifferent, scattered across the vastness without pattern that could be easily read. The silence was not complete, yet it felt whole. Between the layered sounds of insects and the occasional shifting of unseen animals, there existed wide stretches of near-quiet pauses so extended that they seemed almost tangible. In those pauses, the world felt suspended, as though every tree, every blade of grass, every stone had agreed to remain perfectly still for a moment longer than necessary. Marcus did not reflect on the day, nor did he anticipate the next. His thoughts thinned gradually, losing their edges, becoming less defined with each slow breath. The steady rhythm of the night continued without him needing to observe it. The darkness neither pressed nor withdrew, it simply remained, vast and patient. And in that patient, unremarkable continuity, the distant call of a night bird, the soft, repetitive murmur of insects, the nearly inaudible settling of wood and earth, the world carried on quietly, without spectacle, without conclusion, as though it had always been this way and would continue in the same unhurried manner long after all observers had fallen into sleep.